That we are all here in attendance today, and I will ask our Director of Corporate Services to lead us in a moment of reflection.
May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Help us to be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, always having respect for others so that we may serve the people of our city in a helpful manner and for the good of all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Item 3 on our agenda is a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Does anyone have anything? Seeing none, we have no public meetings today, so we'll move to reading and confirmation of the minutes of the council budget meeting of July the 6th, 2020, and the regular council meeting minutes of July the 13th. Can I get a motion to approve those? Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Carr. All in favor? It's carried. It gives me great pleasure to recognize today our retired firefighter, Tim Van Hecke. Tim has been a firefighter with the City of Belleville for 25 years, and we have a number of items to recognize this momentous occasion. So on February 27th, Tim celebrated his 25th anniversary, and that is a remarkable achievement. And then as we dealt with some of the beginnings of the COVID-19 pandemic, he recognized his retirement on April the 30th. So Deputy Chief Patry and myself are going to go to the back to recognize Tim. Come on, this is your chance. Turn around. Jeez. You get to talk to us for a change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been a... I remember when I got first hired, one of the older gentlemen who's passed now, God rest his soul, he told me, he says, before long, you'll be counting the days to retirement. And I didn't believe him, but it wasn't that long ago, actually shortly after Bob passed, that you know, the dates really kick in and you realize that it's coming to an end a lot quicker than you really want it to. We're 60 and out, and trust me, I did not want to leave at 60. My body's telling me different. It's showing the wear from, falling off the ladders and vehicle accidents, all stuff that's part of the job, and, lifting more than you should, but it's part of the job. And I still remember shortly after I was hired here, I ran into Jessie Cheer, which most of you remember. Ran into her grocery shopping, and she says, "How's it going?" And I says, "Jessie, I still can't believe that they pay me to do this." So anyways, because I was a volunteer for several years, and I loved it. And thank you very much for employing me and putting your trust in me, and it's been a pleasure serving the city of Belleville. And I still might be working in the city. I'm now a private fire investigator, which I got all my education through you guys. Thanks for that. And hopefully I'll be doing some more work within the city.
Well, Tim, safety and security is the most basic of the needs we have as human beings, and your career protected us and protected our city and our community, and for that we're very grateful. We're so happy to have this chance to congratulate you. Unfortunately, COVID makes for a different kind of send-off than we would have liked. Yeah. But I know that you were leaving with the wishes and aspirations of the people you've worked with and the people you've worked for you to have a healthy and a long retirement. Whether you do some part-time work on the side or not is up to you. But we wish you and Lisa and your families the very, very best.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations again.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. And we have some other stuff to do, so if you feel you want to leave, feel free. The next item is correspondence, and we do have an item of correspondence. We have a letter from the Integrity Commissioner dated March the 12th, 2020. This letter deals with his decision on an application for inquiry under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and the Code of Conduct dealing with Councillor Williams. For members of the public here in the audience and watching these proceedings on television and streaming, this document is being distributed today and will be uploaded to the city website shortly. As we have done with previous Integrity Commission reports, I will give every member of council an opportunity to speak to it if they wish. Can I please have a motion to receive the item as correspondence? Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Culhane. Discussion. Councillor Kelly, anything you'd like to say on this matter?
No comment.
Well, thank you. Councillor Culhane, anything you'd like to say on the matter?
Yes, Your Worship.
Can I just get you to stand, please?
Yeah. I'm going to speak specifically to Part 3 of this report on page 9. To allegation D, if I have the page right. Sorry, yes, page 9, top of the page. The complainant alleges that Councillor Williams used his influence of office. Nope, I'm wrong again. In the background, the complaint is that Councillor Williams used his influence to have a staff member change reservations for myself. And the situation is, I was interviewed once by Mr. Fleming pursuant to the first of the ethics complaints laid by Councillor Williams. That complaint was against myself, Councillor McCaw, and Mayor Panchuk. And the complaint did not reference the topic of the changing of my reservations. During that conversation, I discussed in depth with Mr. Fleming a number of issues. I felt that I could relate to him, and the issue of my reservations being changed was spoken to, along with the fact that Councillor Kelly's had also been changed. It was not the topic of the complaint that Mr. Fleming was addressing. It was general conversation in specific reference to allegation D. The following is the truth as I know it to be. As new council, we were given the opportunity to attend the first conference of the year. I believe the conference was in February of 2019. It is always my preference to stay at the site hotel, particularly in the winter months. The same goes for Councillor Kelly. We like to stay at the site hotel and meet other councillors and learn and attend the events which are at the site hotel. So, to the best of my knowledge, I was booked into the Sheraton Hotel for the conference. I was approached by a staff member sometime after I thought I had made those arrangements, and approached with reluctance. The staff member seemed hesitant and asked me if I had been spoken to by Councillor Williams in regard to my reservations being changed. And I said no. There'd been no conversation with me, and under no condition did I want to stay off-site. Would she please change the reservations back, and would she please be aware that Councillor Williams or any other councillor did not have the authority to issue directives to staff. Staff should not accept them, and they should not act on them when given in that fashion. So, to the best of my knowledge, my reservation was returned to the Sheraton. I also assured the staff member that I would discuss this with Councillor Williams. Later on, I heard from Councillor Kelly that his reservations had also been changed. He did not want to stay off-site. He was brand new to the position. He had not been consulted about the change, and my advice to him was the same. Ask the staff member to change your reservations back, and I will talk with Councillor Williams. I took the train to Toronto with he and his wife, and he did not speak of it, nor did I feel it was an appropriate time to raise it. It was so busy with hundreds of people, I think 850 people arriving. And when I got to the desk, they had no record of me whatsoever. I had no reservation. So it took so long to get me sorted out and get me a room which cost more than the conference rate that I was booked for originally, that I missed the keynote speaker, which is a bit of a whine, but the keynote speaker was one of the reasons why I wanted to attend that conference in the first place. Eventually, a room was provided. In the morning, I found Councillor Williams and his wife in a quiet corner, and I thought it appropriate to address it. So I approached them, and when I was quite close, I said clearly, I want to talk to you about changing my hotel reservations. Councillor Williams looked down at me, looked at his wife. They both turned their back on me, and I completed my sentence addressing the back and his suit coat. I had not quite finished, and they both walked away. There was no discussion because Councillor Williams prefers not to discuss topics that he's not particularly interested in. So I'm going to go to standard of proof, page 5, in Mr. Fleming's report. Interviewing witnesses that we identified as relevant to the investigation. I feel that I am indeed relevant to this investigation, but I was not called to discuss this particular complaint. Councillor Kelly is indeed relevant to this investigation. He was not called to discuss the complaint. The staff member who approached to inform me that my reservations had been interfered with was indeed relevant to the investigation, but she was not called to discuss the complaint. On page 6 of the report, under findings, Mr. Fleming states, we found no evidence that Councillor Williams used his influence of office to influence staff into changing hotel reservations. Based on the fact that Mr. Fleming did not choose to interview the 3 primary witnesses to this complaint, it is hardly surprising to me that no fault was found. I object to this report. I object to the findings that I have referenced. And on that basis, I do not accept Mr. Fleming's report. I feel that it is fundamentally flawed. I will also state that I have done my level best to address issues directly and honestly and it becomes evident that this avenue, which I consider a waste of taxpayers' dollars, is the only avenue open to me, I will file. I will file on the next occasion that I am exposed to bullying, intimidation, changing of my plans, or any type of interference or unacceptable behavior toward me. I will file with Mr. Fleming if he is still the Ethics Commissioner, or I will file with whoever the Ethics Commissioner is. But I will include every avenue of government open to me, and that includes the Human Rights Commission. I will not go behind someone's back. I will tell the person that I am filing the complaint. I have no problem speaking to an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culhane. Councillor Thompson, anything you'd like to say on this?
No, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Carr.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw.
Thank you. Just after listening to Councillor Culhane a little bit and a few notes I've made myself, when Councillor Williams made the previous complaint against council members around the table, including myself, Mr. Fleming had based his decision on a balance of probabilities, which later was found to be unsubstantiated. Now when Councillor Williams is subject of a complaint like the last one at the last meeting, the findings are not based on a balance of probabilities anymore, which leads me to today. One particular complaint, as we just heard from Councillor Culhane, can be substantiated by council members right here, yet they weren't interviewed by Mr. Fleming. Ironically, I think, that said, the complaint last fall, there were several witnesses, but Mr. Fleming only took the word of Councillor Williams. Here we are today. We have several complaints launched against Councillor Williams, but again, rather than interview witnesses, he takes the word of Councillor Williams. Now, my point here is that there are inconsistencies and specific omissions in his reports, and that really causes me to question his methods and his interviewing process at all. I'm not satisfied with his findings. I haven't been all along at any level, and ironically, I think it's likely, possibly, Councillor Williams, who seems to have generated the most billable hours for Mr. Fleming when it comes to city business, and I hope that doesn't factor into Mr. Fleming's methodology when it comes to interviewing certain people and making certain decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Millette, anything you'd like to say on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to speak to this at all. I was simply going to accept this. I was at that conference. It was Roma, I believe.
Yes.
And I recall sitting in the hotel lobby bar having a beer at the after we had checked in and discussing with you
Not me.
that your concerns. Well, okay. I do recall the process whereby this alleged reservations being changed and with an allusion to the fact that it may have been, well, that came out afterwards. But I do recall that we were given the option to stay at the Marriott, I believe, around the corner next to City Hall in Toronto from the Sheraton Centre. I never had my reservation canceled at the host hotel Sheraton Centre. I was given the option, as it says here, members were able to utilize this option or not. And I was, for the very same reason that Councillor Culhane outlined, it was winter. We were at the Sheraton Centre where all of the events were taking place, and I just felt for the convenience of it, and again, being a new councillor, I wanted to stay at the host hotel. But that aside, my recollection of that is just as I just stated. We're now at Integrity Commissioner finding number 3 or 4 on this. I'm to understand that there's going to be a parade of these yet to come, and from what's been reported, There have been no findings of guilt. All of the complaints, from what I'm to understand, are against one councillor. And what we're seeing, I'm afraid, is a barrage of revenge complaints. A lot of people around this table are concerned about the costs of these. Well, yeah, it is costing, but my concern is that now we've got a barrage of complaints that were filed for vindictiveness, and this is, I don't think, the intent of this whole process. Now I'm seeing they don't like the process. Some don't like the process of Mr. Fleming. I have never spoken to the man. I, again, was part of that conference. I could have spoken to him. I didn't have a complaint with what had happened, so I guess that's probably why I wasn't spoken to. But my worry is that we were urged to try and address issues that affect the city around this table. And I think I spoke a little harshly last meeting against Councillor Sanderson directly. And I was so chastised by that thought that I knew that that was not parliamentary behavior, and that's not the way we're supposed to act around this table, that sitting at my kitchen table I sent Councillor Sanderson an apology, and he accepted it. I'm worried that the decorum of this room is being eroded. This has become toxically personal, and I know there are more of these to come. It is not in any way, shape, or form going to help the confidence that the public is going to have in this body. And I'm quite frankly, I think this is yet another sad day that we have to address another one of these that's seemingly an internecine battle among what are supposed to be people who are deliberating with the public, with the city's interest at heart, but we've got a parade instead of these findings that are, quite frankly, a waste of time and money. So,
thank you, Councillor Millette. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'll just quickly, I know I spoke last time we met with Council, just on how I believe the process is a right one given the opportunity that when there's investigative initiatives and when there's findings that need to come before Council. I do believe that a lot of these are retribution, as you stated. And again, given the fact that they've gone into them and found that I have been cleared of those, I do want to address the last one because I know Councillor Culhane did bring that up. And when it came to Roma, which was a great conference in January 2019, I, being an owner of a Marriott and a Best Western, I'm able to get from time to time employee rates. These rates I got were $54. They were only a couple blocks away from the conference. I let the traveling secretary know, Ms. Tuman, that we had some rates, and I offered and said, if anyone wants them, I've got some rooms. That was the extent of it. Ms. Tuman took care of the arrangements as she did, and again, there was I was the only one who stayed in the room. So I stayed in the room, and the rest stayed at the conference, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's every councillor has their opportunity to decide where they want to stay and spend taxpayer dollars. There's no problem with that. The bill at the end of that stay was $889 for accommodation for other councillors. Mine was only $154. So be it. I saved $600. Not a big deal. I did remember the conversation with Ms. Culhane. We actually sat in the train together for 2 hours on the way home. We had spoke about the issue. Things were fine. Certainly did not turn her back to her. But again, I will apologize publicly to Ms. Culhane, as I always have, if she feels I've wronged her in any way. I absolutely have enjoyed my time with many councillors around this table, including Ms. Culhane, and that
Councillor
was not the
Culhane.
Councillor Culhane, thank you, sir. Going forward, and looking at ways I've done this before, there was no issue when I helped the city book rooms in Korea. I think we stayed at the Western, Mr. Mayor, and we stayed there for 2 nights in Seoul, and we did use the same rate, and we did save about $2,000 of the taxpayer dollar because of myself being able to get a rate. I know that the management of the Seoul Hotel was not happy with me because I was able to get a good rate, and they expressed that, but nonetheless we did, and we saved taxpayer dollars. If we can do that and save taxpayer dollars, I think it is a good thing that a councillor can do. I know that the investigations so far this year have cost well over $16,000. Last year were $45,000. Well over $60,000 of taxpayer dollars have been spent to the Integrity Commissioner. And given this case, maybe this whole case, as Ms. Culhane has pointed out, may have cost $6,000, Councillor Culhane. But again, after we've saved $600-700. So again, bad money after good. There's better ways that we can deal with this, I feel, sometimes. And I'm sorry that's come to that. I hope in the future, again, I think this is hopefully the end of these, that we can continue to settle scores in the back room. We can continue to work together. I think there's a lot of great things this council has done and will continue to do. And hopefully this is it for these complaints. Thank you very much.
I'll remind my colleagues around the table that when we refer to each other, we refer to each other by our titles at this table. It is disrespectful to refer to some councillors by council and then others by Mr. or Ms. or Miss. And you know, I think if you are not able to maintain that decorum, then you probably should stay in your seat. Councillor Sandison, do you have anything you'd like to say on this?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, my colleagues, this is another long, this time 10-page opinion from the Integrity Commissioner, and deals with multiple matters. I agree with some of the previous comments that have been made on both sides of this issue. Regardless of the recommendation, I feel that it is never appropriate to change accommodation arrangements for other councillors. A city councillor is never responsible for booking rooms for a colleague. We have resources in our office which handle this, including a dedicated coordinator of mayor and council services. I actually remember receiving a call from Councillor Culhane on the Sunday, the check-in day at the hotel, where she arrived to find a sold-out hotel with no record of a reservation, and you know, trying to deal with this all on a Sunday. And I'm grateful that Councillor Kelly helped out, and they were able to get her a room, albeit not at the conference rate, but it was an unfortunate circumstance. Today's report, consistent with previous reports, has become a very expensive process for taxpayers when our Integrity Commissioner is involved. So I want to spend some time commenting today on the use of the Integrity Commissioner by members of Council. It is obvious from the nature of this complaint and the subject matter that it was initiated by a member of our council, or that a member of our council assisted whoever did file the complaint. Members of council have a variety of ways to bring forward concerns that they have. Most can be accomplished for free or for a much lower cost than this process. The choice of any councillor to either directly or indirectly use the Integrity Commissioner for a complaint against a fellow councillor is done purely to cause political damage in front of the public. If it is, as some would have us believe, a courageous action, we should all be professional enough to be able to deal with these issues face to face, instead of turning the entire Integrity Commissioner process into a weapon to use against others. I have not, nor will I bring forward a complaint to the Integrity Commissioner about another member of council. I see nothing honorable about councillors bringing forward a complaint in an anonymous or confidential manner that allows them to hide their identity or their intentions. My personal style is to deal with issues head-on and face-to-face whenever possible. I use my words to make my case and try to convince others of the validity of my points. Yes, my style can be very direct and blunt, but I believe in trying to solve problems as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And if I'm not satisfied after dealing face-to-face with a colleague, and if I feel it is important enough matter to pursue further, you will see me bring it up here on the floor of our council chamber in full view of the rest of council and the public. I have done that previously as a councillor, I have done it as your mayor, and I will continue to do so. I've always liked the phrase, integrity is demonstrated by the actions people take when no one else is watching. The people around this table possess a voice other people do not have through the virtue of our elected positions. Trying to hide our displeasure by using an anonymous complaints process that costs our taxpayers money is not something to be proud of. We should all hold ourselves and each other to a higher standard and be willing to accept the responsibility that comes with following a path of transparency. In my opinion, a confidential process whereby members of council can can be publicly accused by another member of council without knowledge or the ability to face their accuser is just plain wrong. It weaponizes the Integrity Commissioner. It cannot be possibly good for relations between members of council. Unfortunately, this is not just happening here in Belleville. These inter-council squabbles involving Integrity Commissioners are happening all over Ontario. As mayors, we have had discussions with the Minister of Municipal Affairs about how this is being used, and he has promised that changes are coming. Until then, we're stuck with it in its current state for the time being. Councillor Williams has suggested that both this complaint today and the one we dealt with at the last meeting are retribution due to his complaint that was made against me. Let me be clear. This is not a return complaint by me or involving me in any way. Hiding behind an anonymous process is not my style. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a very direct person. If I have a disagreement with someone, they will know exactly what I think and whether I agree with their point of view. In fact, I have been described by some in the media as someone who, quote, has the subtlety of a Mack truck, unquote. But I am a very passionate person, and whether I am successful on a point, I will always make my position clear. I win some and I lose some, but one thing's for certain, I don't go running to the Integrity Commissioner when I don't get my way. I know Councillor Williams was not happy that I did not recommend him as the chair of the Economic Development and Destinations Committee last May. I know Councillor Williams was not happy that his friend and neighbour was not appointed a member of that committee. I know Councillor Williams was not happy that I did not agree with his recommendation that a specific staff member lead a certain city initiative. I know that that staff member involved in Councillor Williams' complaint did not follow proper city policy and report the issue to their supervisor, where it would have to be dealt with and where it should have been dealt with in the first place. This is how and where it should have been directed, but instead we find ourselves here today dealing with the fallout of that original action. As a councillor, I champion the idea of having an Integrity Commissioner. Some have questioned why I have questioned some of the Integrity Commissioner's findings. A good idea, poorly implemented, doesn't work right. In defense of Mr. Fleming, our current Integrity Commissioner, there are not clear directives of how an Integrity Commissioner is to fulfill their role, what evidence they must consider, what costs they can or should not incur, or when someone has the right to know the identity of an accuser. As Minister Clark promised us, change is on the way, and it is my hope the process will get better over time with clear direction from the province. In my opinion, none of the complaints this council has received reports on should have been sent to the Integrity Commissioner in the first place, starting with the first one filed against me and including the one we are dealing with today. It is distracting, it belittles the process, it takes time away from more important issues our city needs to deal with, and it causes ill will around this table. Every member of council has the opportunity to bring to this table the changes they feel are important for the city of Belleville. As members of council, you get to have your say, but that doesn't mean you get to have your way. The way to do that is to build consensus by working with other councillors, discussing your ideas with them, and gaining their support. If you're having a hard time doing that, look in the mirror before looking at others. Revenge has no place in this chamber. Using the Integrity Commissioner against each other must stop. So please, if there are any more complaints currently before the Integrity Commissioner that were initiated by members of this council, I ask you to withdraw them. As other council members have said, we should be able to have conversations to deal with our differences, not to use the Integrity Commissioner as a weapon. So please stop this. Now. Last June, I made similar comments about a rash of points of personal privilege we had dealt with in a relatively short period of time. I recognize every member's right under our rules to bring forward a point of personal privilege. However, I suggested that it may not be the most effective way to deal with conflict. I can tell you that many councillors are now having more conversations to deal with things between themselves instead of rising on a point of personal privilege. So I hope my comments had something to do with that change, and I thank all members of council for doing that. Unfortunately, some have now turned to filing Integrity Commissioner complaints. I hope we will see these stop. Last June, I spoke about the Bruce Tuckman theory of group development, where virtually all high-performing teams go through 4 stages. Forming, storming, norming, and performing was how I described them. I spoke about how we were formed when the voters selected the 9 of us to represent them as a city council during this 4-year term. Last year, we had clearly moved on to the storming phase, where some of us start to work out conflicts in our working styles and or our perspectives. The goal was for us to move into the norming phase, where we learn to resolve our differences, appreciate each other's strengths, and work constructively towards common goals. The last phase is the performing phase, when we see our most productive accomplishments. I am grateful that most of us took these comments to heart and have moved into the performing stage. Based on the significant achievements of our council already this term, it is apparent we are performing at a high level, an impressive accomplishment certainly at this stage of our mandate. One need only to look at the community investments, the local and provincial recognition of our budget, and our plans for capital investment as proof of how well we are doing. But I also recognized last year that some of us may not want to move past this storming phase. Over the past year, there are many examples of the storming on the part of a few. We have seen this through allegations of improper behavior, ranging from objections to the naming of an interim CAO, challenges about who gets to decide on what time our meetings start, who attends public announcements on behalf of the city, how the agendas for our meetings are set, or what motions are permitted to be introduced at what time. It has continued as we deal with the worst pandemic in over a century, as some storm about what information or working documents different members on different committees see. It appears some members of council wish to remain in the storming phase, wrongly believing this behavior will help them get their way. The rest of us can't do much about that, other than to continue to work at the norming and performing stages. But imagine what we could accomplish if we were all norming and performing. You know, while some members of the public and the media may find dealing with these Integrity Commission reports as amusing or interesting, it is not making a difference in the lives of people in our community. It's a bit about inside baseball, dealing with relationships around the table which are of no consequence to others besides ourselves. It's not important, not like, for example, Bylaw 2020-145, which we will give final reading to later this afternoon. This bylaw will convey to Habitat for Humanity the deed of some city-owned property that will be used to provide for affordable housing for some fortunate residents who will see their lives and those of their families change for the better. Let's not confuse what we've spent the better part of 40 minutes doing now as important work. It's not. What it has done has simply delayed us from getting to the important work today. As your mayor, I will continue to work hard and collaborate with the members of council who are willing to perform and achieve our goals for the future of our city. Our work is too important as a collective to allow negativity to take us off track. We will continue to work for our community, for the betterment of our residents and our businesses. While I believe we have already accomplished a great deal, we're not done yet. We still have much more to do. Using the Integrity Commissioner to settle differences between members of council is not appropriate. It is not good for us and the work we are trying to do. It is disrespectful to each other and the residents we serve. I respectfully request those who are doing so to stop. Motion on the floor is to receive the report. I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Item 8, Committee of the Whole. A motion to go into Committee of the Whole to hear and consider reports, passing of recommendations and resolutions with myself in the chair. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's carried. 8A, Reports. The agenda shall include under reports items that warrant individual attention from Council, starting with 8A1, Request for Proposals, RFP ENG 2020-17, Consulting Services for Completion of a Infrastructure Phasing Strategy to support the growth and development in the City of Belleville. Senior Project Manager's Report Number ENG 2020-14, and the resolution is that the request for proposals, RFP ENG 2020-17, submission from the Municipal Infrastructure Group Limited, be accepted for completion of an infrastructure phasing strategy to support growth and development in the City of Belleville in the amount of $102,545 plus $13,330.85 HSD, for a total dollar amount of $115,875.85, this being the most qualified bid received, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the acceptance agreement on behalf of the Corporation of the City of Belleville, and that the City Clerk be authorized to affix the corporate seal. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Carr. Discussion. Anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 8A2, the COVID-19 Pandemic Economic Recovery Plan. Manager of Economic and Strategic Initiatives, Report Number ECDEV 2020-20, and the resolution is that pursuant to the Manager of Economic and Strategic Initiatives, Report Number ECDEV 2020-20, the COVID-19 Pandemic Economic Recovery Plan be approved. In the floor, moved by Councillor Millette, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Discussion. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Worship, through you. So whoa, good feedback there. Rock band, 1, 2, 1, 2. The EDDC met about a month and a half ago, and staff had presented ways in which business can be helped during COVID-19. And as the committee hadn't had their strategic plan approved yet, but again knew what they wanted to do and knew what businesses were facing in terms of this pandemic, we received and voted to approve a COVID-19 Pandemic Economic Recovery Plan with a lot of conversation around businesses and what they are facing during this pandemic and what they need. And the long and short of this plan from the City of Belleville, it's leadership from the City of Belleville on behalf of its businesses. It's leadership in looking not only inward but outward, looking at the organizations that sit around the EDDC and otherwise. And it's looking at a short and long-term perspective on what is not over yet, a pandemic that is right now doing okay for some businesses as Phase 3 has come in, but a lot of businesses are still struggling, and a lot of different industries. And when we're looking at short-term, there were some initiatives that already have been implemented from this plan, probably from staff or from other organizations that have done some work. But there is still a real long-term strategy needed by this city, and looking at its partners and looking at its businesses and across all horizontal patterns of this city and how we're helping them, and how that we're looking forward not only to September, but from November, December, January, February, and onwards, as we still are in a pandemic, how we're supporting those businesses. Now, as we've gone through a budget already, we see just the significance of business and commercial business specifically and industrial business to the city, jobs, our taxes that we collect, and it's really upon us, and the EDDC is taking a leadership role to ensure that we're taking care of those businesses, that we're looking after the jobs that are already here, and we're really looking at a unique lens under COVID-19 on what struggles businesses are currently facing and what they will be facing in the next 4 or 5 months as we go through the pandemic. Strategies that are in this plan include retraining of workforce, supporting local, exploring your own community campaign, development of experimental tourism products, virtual events. A new one that was added at the end was improving broadband services, not specifically normally a municipal objective. We know this is provincial or federal. However, we take the leadership to speak for our constituents and businesses. And something we heard of when we were having our committee meeting on these initiatives, is we have a lot of not only rural, but city businesses and individuals through COVID-19 who are having trouble with internet connectivity. And that's something, as we speak for as a council, as a city, it should concern us. We know that we can't ourselves put the last mile in or towers, but we can speak for those businesses and those constituents, and as we should be. And I think this plan was really a great plan put together by the staff and debated at EDDC. that does go towards council in order to have action. So let me be clear as well, because I know this came up with the EDDC plan. This does not denote action. This plan only states that we support these initiatives from the EDDC. The EDDC will have to come back together and now put together initiatives that are a recommendation and come back to council so we can have action. So this plan is just a plan. It does speak to a wide range of industries and business across the city of Belleville, but it is leadership that's needed now more than ever. And most importantly, when we look at this plan, the EDDC will be speaking about them, but also looking at the gaps. And when we had originally, I think in November, first put together the strategic plan that has now been passed by council, one great thing that staff are doing is they put together a report card. And that report card will have check marks of not only what Belleville's doing, but the agencies that we support, QEDC, Bay Quinte Regional Marketing Board. You know, anyone that even the province and the feds that we support will be there, and council will get a copy of that. So this plan, if approved, will come back in its entirety through the EDC. There'll be conversations, and you'll see a report card of how this plan is being carried out in the short term and in the long term. And I think as long as we're putting our foot forward, as we don't know what's going to happen with business in the next 4 or 5 months, I think it's the best thing we can do as a council. And I think on behalf of all the businesses in the city and those constituents that are employed or self-employed, I think it's the best thing we can do to put together a plan like this and fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Culhane. You can sit. We're in committee of the whole.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. Manager Post here?
Yes, she is. I'll have her come to the podium, please.
Thank you. As you're fully aware, I sit on this committee, and I asked to do so to learn more about economic development. And you're also aware that in my previous 2 terms, I had no exposure whatsoever. It's an intense committee. It's time-consuming, but it's very interesting. And the range and depth and scope of what you do is very much appreciated, and how much you bring to the table. Now that the entire plan is put together, it gives you a different perspective. When you read it, at least I speak only for myself, it becomes apparent to me, though, that there's a great deal of crossover. For example, Councillor Williams mentioned a scorecard, but Bree already does, I believe, exactly that. Isn't that correct?
Through His Worship to
Bree
Councillor
survey
Culhane.
of businesses to get their responses?
Yes, the BRE committee does typically do BRE surveys annually, yes.
So that particular item is already covered?
Yes, we haven't specifically done one related to the pandemic. Typically, the BRE committee does them by sector. So
Right.
they would do an industrial sector, retail, restaurant. This would be sort of an overall BR&E related to the pandemic impact. Yes.
If I may, Your Worship?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. You made a statement in your report. It is recognized that economic recovery will require substantial intervention from all 3 levels of government working cooperatively. And that point is well taken. The difficulty I'm having is that business is one sector that's being impacted by the terrible wake left by COVID-19, being left and that will be left. We have no idea how bad it's going to get for people. No one can definitively answer that question. The stress is already being felt. Requests from groups for support are part of today's agenda. Requests from all manner of groups who rely on donations are going to come thick and fast, and it's expected. Actually, we were warned 14, 15 months ago by a municipal expert before COVID ever became apparent that there were tougher times ahead. So I guess my point is, it's an excellent plan. A lot of work has gone into it, but I think it needs to be pared down myself at this point, and I don't know whether that's a possibility, that it could go back and be, in instances particularly where the debris is already doing what's referenced to be done in a broader scope. Personally, I think we need to cut down as much to the bone as possible to carry this forward. Thanks very much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. This is back-to-back meetings now. We're dealing with the Economic Destinations Committee, and as the Vice Chair, I feel very strongly about this. And thanks to Karen for the report. Over the past several days, I've been checking what other cities are doing now that we're in phase 3, and you look at our city to the east of us, they have a COVID-19 impact survey on their website. They have a team of 10 people, business leaders, who's on their team for their economic recovery, and the sectors that they are representing are restaurants, accommodation, construction, and retail. Those are some of the sectors that they've brought on board, similar to what we have with our committee. A community, Peterborough has one with Kawartha Lakes. They're already on the game. We know some of our other neighboring communities. I believe Quinte West and Picton have programs in place. The provincial government, part of their rollout, $3.7 billion to support people and jobs. That's where we talked about the province and the feds coming to the plate. They're going to support a lot of the programs that we're going to maybe need a helping hand on. One of the interesting things the province came out with, 5-month interest and penalty-free period for money to help out businesses with their taxes. You go through the report, and I'm going to bring it out here, and just so everybody's on the same page that's following at home, there are 21 things in the COVID-19 pandemic economic recovery plan. So if we go through some of these, the e-commerce support is number 4. That would be something that the Chamber, and there's a consultant, I believe, already with the city working on that. Is that right, Karen?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, that's actually an initiative of our department. So we do have a consultant who is hired, who is working with local business to help them develop their e-commerce platforms.
When we look at developing new virtual events, number 14, that would be something that the Chamber's already doing with activities downtown and the pop-ups. Would that be something?
Yeah, those are all examples of those kind of initiatives, yes.
When we look at number 13, I know I'm bouncing all over, bolster business startup programs. You alluded to that would be a provincial and federal mandate support.
For the most part, we do have some influence on that through our support of the Small Business Center locally. So we do have some direct influence on that.
Number 18 out of the 21 is develop a tourism attraction campaign aimed at a transitional post-COVID timeframe. I've been involved with the Mayor's Task Force, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the Bay Quinte Regional Marketing Board. I know that that's something we're doing right now, and the Mayor's Task Force has talked about this.
That's correct, yes.
So people are doing it, and that's great that they're all working together. And part of the EDDC is to kind of just take the information that's coming, and I think and work with that. So when we look back at where we are today, I think some of your comments were short, medium, long term. We really don't know how this is going to roll out. The health experts keep telling us that in the fall, we don't know if we're going to come into a second wave. So when you look at the information that you have and realize and appreciate maybe the strength that's on the EDDC, do you see this as a big-time benefit for the city?
Through the chair again to Councillor Kelly, absolutely. I mean, this is not something that our businesses or that government has seen in the past here. Economic development is huge. Just as it takes a community to raise a child, I always say it takes a community to raise and maintain a business. We need all hands on deck. We need as much of our efficient resources as we can muster to provide support to our businesses because we don't know what's coming next. you know, we're pretty sure there's some tough times ahead, and we want to make sure that we're ready to provide whatever support, whatever assistance we can to make sure that the impact, the negative impact of this pandemic is lessened for our businesses.
When you hear the argument that somebody else is already doing that, what's your answer to that that's already been taken? When this committee, it's just, this is a helping hand to oversee everything and make it work, and maybe we can get into the weeds, if you will, of these other committees and see what's working or what's not working.
For sure. So that is, you know, from someone looking from the outside, it does look like there's lots of people doing similar work. And I take you back to the comment I just made that economic development is huge. There's always more we could and should be doing to support our businesses. We have a lot of regional partnerships that work extremely well for us. So the Quinte Economic Development Commission, the Bay Quinte Regional Marketing Board, we partner on a lot of things, and that helps us stretch our dollars and improve our impact. But there's also a role to play for the city. So I'll give the QEDC as an example. So certainly the QEDC is out there, they're marketing the region for industrial investment. When a lead comes in and they identify a number of sites in the region that are of interest to them, for example, perhaps one is in Brighton, one is in Belleville, for example. Certainly that regional cooperation got us the lead. And as soon as they've narrowed down to a Belleville or a Brighton location, essentially the gloves are off, right? I'm going to do everything I can to encourage council to fight for that investment, to win it for Belleville, just as the folks in Brighton are going to fight really hard to make sure that it happens in Brighton. So although there is certainly a role for the region to play, there is a key role for the city to play, particularly when it comes to providing leadership in terms of economic development priorities. Yes, we're always going to market ourselves regionally, but we want to make sure that we're getting the Belleville name out there as well. It's really important that we not sort of lose our own identity in our regional initiatives. So I think there's work to be done, both regionally and for the city itself.
And thank you for your comments. And finally, I just wanted to say that, as the mayor touched on in his comments earlier today, we've never seen anything like this before. And if you go to Stats Canada and pull up the unemployment rates for 2020 with COVID, January 5.6 in Belleville, February 6.2, March was 7.1, April was 10, May's 11.8, June's 11.8. You go back one year, and in May it was 5.9 2019, and June 4.9. That was our unemployment rate. It's doubled, more than doubled. People have lost jobs. Councillor Colleen touched on it. We don't know what's ahead of us yet, and we don't know the effects of COVID-19. That is so true. But people have lost jobs. And I see the EDDC really give us our chance to work with this. I said that 2 weeks ago. But I really believe that if other municipalities like Kingston and Peterborough are doing it, let's give us an opportunity with the talent that we have at the table to make this work. And in 2 or 3 years, come back and fire us all. So that's how I feel about this. This is the most important time for business and supporting businesses than ever before. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions for Karen but I just want to make a statement. Economic development is a plan here. I believe that we need to give this committee the opportunity. I've echoed that same thing about duplications in the outside agencies in our community, but on this instance, we have businesses that are hurting big time. We have industries that are hurting. We've got industries that are doing really well. But, you know, when we look at the downtown and how we taken other agencies to help us, help the downtown, and Pacific, the DBIA, again, they've done some special stuff downtown. They've coordinated things. They're helping in the economic recovery of the downtown. Again, that's another agency that can work with this committee. I believe this committee is on a road to helping and Businesses in this community want help. If we don't give them help, we're going to lose more businesses, and we can't have that. We need every business in this community continuing to do businesses in the community, because if we lose a business, we lose tax dollars. We also lose off-spins of some of that money that would be generated by both businesses. Businesses need help. If this agency can give us some help in these pandemic times, and these pandemic times are not over, and I believe that this committee has a job to do, let's give them the opportunity to do a job to help our economy come back to where it was. Because if we don't, we're all going to lose. The citizens will lose, our city hall will lose, our councillors will lose. We can't have that. We need to do the best we can for the citizens of Belleville. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this, and in looking it over, I too believe that this is yet more of what we need to do. The impact, as we all know, of COVID-19, the full impact is not yet known. The more we can do, the more initiatives that we can champion, especially with the backing of the senior levels of government that we've heard just today in the announcement that billions will be flowing. We will have some money coming down the pipe. All of these initiatives, support local campaign, work in Belleville, develop new local restaurant promotion. We saw what, with just a little bit of forethought and some initiative and some creative thinking, what the downtown people have been able to do. The buzz right now about downtown Belleville, for instance, is palpable. People are saying, you know what, that place is happening. It's fun, it's attractive. I'm hoping that it's showing the benefit in the bottom line in the cash, making the cash registers ring. But my point in that is that initiatives like that, and here's a list, a menu of them, of initiatives that we can support through the creation of this document. Does it duplicate what some others are doing? Certainly. But I think the public doesn't care about turf battles when businesses are looking for any lifeboat or life ring that they can reach to. This is just yet another piece in the fabric that will support that recovery and help keep a few people afloat. So I'm certainly supportive of everything that's in this document. And hey, I think the public wants to see this kind of initiative, not who's doing what. And oh, don't worry, that little box D is already being looked after by. They don't care about that. They just want to see action. Okay, so I'm going to support this in its entirety.
Thank you, Councillor McCaw.
Thank you, through you. I too sit on this committee, and I didn't support the document or elements of it when it came forward. I just felt that it was riddled with duplication, and I always have a belief that if you have too many things on the go, you can't do any one thing well, and this to me feels that way. Comment was made about the public cares. Well, the public cares about how we spend tax dollars. And if we can have other organizations doing the job for us so that we don't have to spend those tax dollars, great. I am in business and I hear a lot of things. And right now what I am hearing is now that things are starting to open, we have employees that don't want to come back. They've been too busy collecting CERB and they don't want to return to their employment. So, I mean, this is a problem, and that is what I'm hearing most of at this point in time. We are opening up now businesses, but now we have employees that have been sitting there taking, the CERB for a while, and it's a lot easier to take the CERB and not come to work than it is to come to work. So, I mean, those are a few little things that I have concerns about, because quite frankly, I don't see a cost associated with any of these initiatives, and I cannot support something when I don't know what the cost is, and that's where I come down on this. I can't support it. I simply don't know what the cost is. And I feel it encompasses too many things that we can't do enough of them well when we have all of these things out there. Sure, take a few and focus on those things. Fair enough. But those are the concerns I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCaw. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mayor Panchuk. I'm going to be supporting this plan. I look back at when we passed the budget. And, you referred to comments that were received by, or that were mentioned by the Premier in terms of the fact that the city looked for some efficiencies, and therefore, as a result of that, was getting recognized, but he also pointed out that municipalities should be rewarded. And I kind of see this along the same line, is that, yes, the federal government is doing things at the macro level, the provincial government is doing things in between, but each municipality, as Councillor Kelly points out, is looking at a micro level approach to COVID and how to deal with it. And as the acting Chief Medical Officer of Health said at their last meeting, they figure the pandemic is 18 to 24 months, and we are just in the first phase of or the first 6 months, if you will. And we don't know what the future holds. We do know that this has been life-altering for some people, business-altering for others. Despite the fact that we do have some successes, we have closures as well. And so I think our focus has to be broad at the micro level. A lot of our businesses don't just worry about the local economy. There's a connection to the provincial economy, the national economy, and even the international economy. And so I think it's important that we look at the fact that there's still talk of a global recession. There's the impacts of geopolitics around the world that are playing a part as well. And so we have to be looking beyond just the small business, but we have to be looking at some of our larger business partners that have production on the national and international stage. And so by having a comprehensive plan, and what I like about it is there's no commitment to money here. It's basically a plan, and if there is anything that comes with money, we'll have to come back and we will have to look at it individually. And it'll have to hold up to that strength at that particular moment in time, and the scrutiny of is there duplication, is somebody else already paying for this, can certainly be a discussion on that particular item. But I think a game plan is a good thing to have, a comprehensive plan that takes into consideration all facets of our economy. And then with that, as money starts to roll out from senior levels of government, isn't it nice then to go and say the mayor can present, here's the city budget, this is what we've done, and here's our recovery plan. And this is just a guideline. This is just 2 goalposts we're putting out there. We don't know what the future holds, but this is kind of where we're landing. And with that, I think we'll be well positioned to be able to have those conversations, to then turn around and obtain funds at that senior level to deal with the micro issues that are going on in our community. So I think this is excellent. I think this is just a part 2 to the budget that we just passed. And, if there's a little bit of duplication, so be it. I don't necessarily look at this as just the plan for the Economic Development and Destination Committee either. This is the City of Belleville's plan, because as I said before, economic development is one of those areas which gives to the city, which gives to the community, and it allows our families to sustain themselves. And so it's a City of Belleville plan, and that's how we need to look at it. And so I congratulate the committee for bringing it forward, and staff and their involvement. I think it's an excellent plan, and it's a robust plan that will carry us forward.
All right, everyone's spoken. Councillor Sanderson. Do you want to turn it on, I think? Is it on? Just...
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of thoughts when I read through the plan. One, that it's a statement of work for sure, and it's fairly detailed and comprehensive. There were a couple of comments made, one by Manager Post, that we needed all hands on deck. I think we have all hands on deck. And the other comment from the chair of the EDDC committee was that we need leadership, and I think we've got we've seen leadership at the federal, provincial, and municipal level through COVID like we've never seen before. And it's been, as a guy that's been around for a while, it's been actually amazing to watch the three levels of government work so closely towards a common goal, which is to sort of get us through this pandemic, both from a health perspective as well as a financial perspective. So I think there's lots of leadership, and you know, we've got the stats in our community to show that, both on the health front and what we've been able to do to assist our residents in a variety of ways to help them through the finances. On the business side, you know, we did just recently endorse the EDDC strategic plan, and my thoughts are that what's come forward here is just a subset of the work they should be doing or are doing. And so I listened to the chair, Councillor Williams, and I listened to the vice chair, Councillor Kelly, and I too will be supporting this. Thank you.
All right. Before we wrap it up, Councillor Culhane, do you have something else you want to say? And then I'm going to close it off.
Thank you. If I may ask, through you, Your Worship, Manager Post, just to entertain another question from you. By no means do I not support a COVID recovery plan. Please recognize that. I'm asking about the bulk, if you like, of the plan and the necessity for that much bulk. In particular, item number 15, maintain property taxation and utility rates for industrial and commercial properties at the lowest rate possible. At no time during any of these meetings have I heard anyone talk about effecting tax rates in any way from this committee. So I really don't understand why that's even in there.
Through the chair to Councillor Culhane, that was an initiative that staff recommended in the report, just really as a reminder that at these times when many businesses have no revenue coming in, our competitiveness is never more important, I think, than now, and any opportunities we have to lessen the tax burden on business is critically important at this point.
Through you, Your Worship, just so I can be clear, how can we as a committee, other than through the proper process of council, impact property and taxation rates? I mean, that's why I get stuck in the methodical components of plans, because I'm methodical. If it isn't effective, it isn't something I can seize on, that we can work on this and do something with it, I don't want to support it. I don't want to support the whole thing if I don't see any purpose for number 15 in terms of what we can do as a committee. We have Director Hines and her staff who do excellent work and bring us forward budgets, and we consider the budgets and vote on them. I just have no idea how this committee is supposed to influence property taxation and utility rates.
Through the chair to Councillor Culhane, like many things in this pandemic business recovery plan, the committee can't necessarily carry out all of these things, do these things themselves, but they can have an influence on having those things done. So there's all kinds of examples of things in that in those recommendations that the city won't necessarily take charge of, but we can have an influence. We talked a little bit before about high-speed internet service. That's not a service that the city is necessarily going to provide, but it is something that we can influence. And I think the committee, the EDDC committee, can make recommendations, can have influence on making sure council has information on what tax impact increases will have on our businesses. So although they're not going to make the decisions, they're not going to do the actions, they can have influence.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's wrap this up. You know, as I listened to the debate, there's a couple of comments that I heard that I think were very good, and I'm not trying to disagree with them, but I think they were important comments. One, Councillor Kelly talked about the fact that you know, we have a very talented group of people that attend the Economic Development and Destination Committee meetings, and you know that in a couple of years that let's let them get to their job, and in a couple of years that we can make a determination. And I think he's right. And just last meeting, we approved the strategic plan, and I think that the committee needs to focus on executing their strategic plan and get going on that, because that is what is going to be judged on their success moving forward. And I think that the more that we fragment it, the more we fracture their focus on things, it's going to get us in difficulty. The other comment was made by Councillor Carr, and he talked about the fact that there are no resources tied to this report, and that we would make future decisions for that. Well, for at least the next year, we've already decided. And we've decided that we're not putting any resources into this area. Matter of fact, on July the 7th, CO Bove and myself met with Manager Post because of her comments in the past about the large workload that the Economic Development and Strategic Initiatives Department has, and the fact that they don't have as big a headcount as other communities. And we had that meeting to make clear that there were no additional resources coming this year, that Council made its decision through the budgetary process of where we're going to allocate our resources, and that if the work is unmanageable, they need to reduce the things they're working on and do things well rather than do a bunch of things poorly. And that's the message that we sent as a council in terms of where we're going. Because at the end of the day, plans without resources to enact them are doomed to fail. And we can approve this document today, and if we do not reconsider our budget decisions, which I'm virtually certain we will not be doing, that means we will not have the resources to enact it. And what that does, it puts us in a situation where we're now, as a council, have to be aware of the fact that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. On the one side, we're saying that one of the most effective things that we can do for our community is to recognize the economic hardship and come in with a lean budget that never before that people can remember a time where we actually had a budget reduction in terms of tax impact. But then on the other hand, we start saying that we're going to now expend these funds to supplement our departments. It doesn't work. And so those of you that are considering voting in favor of this have to understand that you're basically giving additional responsibilities without the ability to deliver additional resources. When you actually go through the plan, there's nothing new in this plan in the sense that all areas, all of the, each of the 21 areas that are itemized or listed in this report are already being done by other departments of the City of Belleville or people that we're in partnership with. And if we have any concerns about them being addressed, we should call those organizations here and we can have them come to the podium. Matter of fact, at the next meeting on August the 10th, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network is coming. This is the group that is responsible for additional cellular service in rural Ontario as well as the broadband gap. At that meeting, which is as a result because of some of the stresses that we've had from COVID and people working at home, the city's already contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars towards increasing broadband service. Many of us have gone to multiple announcements that we're now waiting for them to actually to move ahead. To have a committee, again, sit around and discuss about the ability for us to augment our broadband with no power to do anything about it is an exercise in futility. We'll have Eorn here. Council can ask questions about the timeline, when the RFPs are going out, how much our contribution is, what the different service providers are actually doing to include it. We will have them right here at the podium. And it was not easy to get them to come here because they work for not just our municipality, but others. To have a duplication of that does not make sense to me. On April the 20th, perhaps Council needs to be reminded, but on April the 20th, I made a statement about the fact that Belleville was ready to reopen, that as soon as the province gave us the all clear sign that it was safe and reasonable for us to do, that our economy was ready to go back And we have seen that as we've gone through the different stages, including stage 3. And there are people that are going back to work. They are happy to be back to work, and there are customers and suppliers that are there. But in terms of what we will do to help, withstand this COVID storm, the heavy lifting, as many people have said, comes from the federal and provincial governments. They have the policy jurisdiction, and they have the resources to do something about it. For us to get around and to talk about it without being able to influence that decision any more than we already are is, again, an exercise in futility. Leadership is about making a plan to deal with items that we have the power to be able to take action on. And I think that we have been very good about that as a municipality. I think about when you look at the amazing work that we have done by being calm, cool, and collected through this whole process. Our first meeting on March the 20th, when we delegated certain authorities so that in the event that council was unable to meet before the province had amended the legislation, we delegated authority to the CAO and to the treasurer to ensure that the business of the corporation of the city would continue. We felt it was very important that regardless of what was going on in people's lives, they could count on the city of Belleville for their services and for the service we provide them and their businesses. And we have done an amazing amount of work. We've managed those municipal resources, those services, we've continued them. And daily I am in touch with businesses who are talking about what they need. And we've dealt with a number of things, including areas that were not within our jurisdiction. For example, we've had a number of tenants reach out to us, commercial tenants who did not have protection under the province's rules that residential tenants had. We had commercial tenants reach out to us. I've had numerous conversations with landlords trying to find a way to ensure that tenants who were unable to pay their rent during this time, while they were particularly trying to understand the federal provincial commercial rent relief program, that they would be able to continue. And it has worked well. Dealing with immigration matters. We have some of our members, some of our businesses in the industrial park are expanding. They required expertise from out of the country to come to either help set up the lines or to re-strategize or whatnot. And we have worked directly with our member of parliament in order to get them here. Building permits. We talk about this, and one of the things I am the most proud of is how our building department has responded to this to make it easier and simpler and faster and smoother, particularly when they came in on the Saturday of the deadline for basement permits that were allowed to be taken. They came in and worked until midnight that day to approve all those basement permits to ensure that the industry that was being very careful, very reasonable, and very responsible, that they were able to continue working because they would not be eligible for benefits and they would not be able to they continue working. They don't get paid if they wouldn't work. Transportation and logistics, companies that have seen a slowdown in their output, or they had to reactivate themselves and they had to reactivate their transportation systems, their logistics backgrounds. Talking about marketing, that when it is safe and prudent to do so, that we can tell people to come back and join us here in Belleville. All those things are occurring as it is now, and it's part of the leadership that we're providing. But perhaps the most important thing when we talk about, and I speak with businesses about what they need us to do, the fact that we have a no tax increase this year and there are no increases in their water and their wastewater fees this year, they tell me they cannot express how much that means to them, to know that the city of Belleville is sharing with them in this process. And and that's something that we need to remember, that we decided that we wanted to do that. And when the Premier called me to asking me about exactly how did you do that, he told me that he's not aware of a single other municipality that was able to do that this year. And we explained why. I explained why we're able to do it. Is most of the credit of this goes to our great staff who have worked so hard on this. But the reality is that is the competitive advantage that we now have, where we are seen as different. Let's talk about what really we need to see happen in our community, because there's two big barriers for an economic recovery in our community. One is public confidence, which is consumer confidence, which is going to come from whether or not people continue to have jobs and how they feel about the prospects, and how they feel about testing and what the spread of COVID-19 is in our community. But the second big issue is about liquidity. It's about the money that's going in our economy that won't cause people to stop spending, won't cause businesses to stop hiring, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest factor on our economic recovery is going to be banks. The Canadian banks have not stepped up like federal, provincial, and municipal governments have done. They haven't stepped up in the sense of understanding that this crisis of credit that is going on is what's really going to hurt us down the road. And I know in speaking with our member of parliament and our MPPs that at the end of the day, we need Canada's banks to also step up and help. And I don't want to get too far off track, but in 2008, that crisis that happened, which was a bank-led crisis, taxpayers stepped up and helped them. Today, taxpayers need help from the banks. They need to make credit easier. They need to give credit to companies to keep them afloat. And right now, the only reason they're doing it is because the federal government is giving them incentives to do it. We need them to open up their purses to keep that liquidity going and to go there. And no City of Belleville resolution or initiative is going to get that to occur. No committee of the City of Belleville is going to get that to occur. And unless we're dealing with that, I won't be supporting the plan. Not because I don't want us to have a plan, but we have a plan that's working very, very well. I don't want to have people think that we're going to do something and then we're not going to fund it later on. With that, I'll call the question. The motion on the floor. All in favor? Carried. 8B, consent items. Council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and Council shall consider such items individually. Councillor Culhane.
8C1B, please.
Let's get to 8C and vote. Anything under the 8Bs, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Kelly.
No, thank you.
Councillor Carr.
8B2, please.
2, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
8B1 and 8B2.
Okay. Councillor Millette.
8B4, please.
Councillor McCaw. No, thank you. Councillor Williams.
8B1 and 8B4, please.
Councillor Sanderson.
8B2.
Great. Good. So then that the following agenda items be approved with the exception of 8B1, 8B2, and 8B4. Moved by Councillor McCaw, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? It's carried. Let's go to 8B1, the Retail Business Holidays Act, Director of Corporate Services, Clerk's Report Number DCS 2020-30. And the resolution is that the Director of Corporate Services, Clerk's Report Number DCS 2020-30, Retail Business Holidays Act be received. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I would like to speak. I know this is only being received, but I certainly caution in the future where we look at opening up on extended statutory holidays. In my number of years of retail, which now extends longer than I want to think, we've gone from opening, one time we used to close Mondays, then that quit, then we opened Monday, then we closed Wednesday afternoon, that quit. Now we're open, we're open Thursday and Friday nights, now we're open every night, then we got to open Sunday. Now we're asking for another days of business for the little guy that's trying to run a business on his own. If that person has to hire somebody to work those hours, and a lot of businesses are running on their own, and without the small independent retailer in our economy, we're done. There's big businesses that can afford to open up and stagger some staff and open up on a holiday, but overall, we have taken the retail business over the years from maybe 40 hours a week now to probably 70 or 80 hours a week. That's stretching the dollar, and I'll tell you, you've talked to most retailers, when they open more hours, those dollars get spent on less and less hours. You're open more and more hours because the big guy opens up on statutory holidays, so if the little guy doesn't follow up, he's not going to get the traffic on that particular day. That's not fair, and I grant it, there's some of the big guys want to be, and you get into tourist areas and they're opening, but we got to be careful of the little guy, because if we add more hours, we're going to be putting them in jeopardy of how to retail their business. Then they don't stay open, then they criticize, the community gets criticized because not enough people are open. They go shopping, they're not open, and how do you go downtown, or how do you go to a retail place when they're not open? You go to the Quinte malls, they're all regulated by hours set by the mall people. Get downtown, and they don't happen. They work on their own. But I'm just saying, we need to be very careful if we're going to open up more hours for these small retailers to try to survive along with the big ones. We're looking at very concerned situations for retailers. So I want to express that concern that's being heard from a few retailers already, and I know it's only received, but I caution us as a city is looking at opening up extra retail hours and straggling some of our hours, some of our retailers not be able to afford to stay in business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor McCaw.
Thank you, through you. Just so that I understand, so this gives them the right to open should they choose to.
Well,
but
yeah,
am I understanding this correctly?
Well, this is simply for information.
Okay.
There is a process now for businesses to go through to designate themselves as a tourist attraction, and they're able to open. And this is information. And so, you know, in the event that people are coming to you and saying they want to open on these days, this is where you can direct them. Probably, you know, this could have been dealt with differently, but it was raised under new business at the last meeting. So that's why the report is here today.
Okay, just further to that. So I'm just thinking about what Councillor Thompson is saying. Wouldn't, if we did go through and if it did end up happening that way, would it not be at the discretion of the retailer themselves whether they wanted to open?
If the process was followed, where the bylaw and the public meeting and all that went through, and let's just say for the sake of argument that we ended up getting there where we determined that all of Belleville was to be this area, then it would be voluntary unless people live or have, like, for example, in shopping centers where the landlord has special conditions. But the motion today is simply to receive it, to leave it the way it is existing.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear that up. This would not be mandatory if it did go through. Just for Councillor Thompson's.
Yeah, I don't think, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'll let him speak for it. But I think his concern was that it's a slippery slope, that when a competitor opens, then other people have to open to remain competitive, and then it becomes an unbalanced playing field. Councillor Thompson, was I accurate in that?
Yes.
Do you want to add anything to it?
No, that's exactly what I wanted to reply with. It's strictly volunteer, but business is business.
Yeah.
And if you want to stay competitive, that means you got to open. That means extra hours. That means extra staff. That means less profit. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. And I asked through new business that this report, I think it was a couple of council meetings ago, through yourself to Mr. McDonald. When I looked at municipalities that already had this, Kingston was the one that I found a bylaw in place. I think that had it since 1998. Does this follow their bylaw a little bit? Did you look when you compared Kingston compared to Belleville? I know that one of the things I did notice was that they designated themselves a tourist area. I guess that's what qualified them to, as a municipality, bypass the Municipal Act in having a retail establish and open if they want to. And just on that note, the applicant that I was speaking on behalf of, or the retail business, actually has an LCBO establishment, and what they've expressed to me is that because of our current bylaw, they cannot open under unless we have a bylaw that allows them to open. And what they were stating is during COVID, during these tough times, having Canada Day, having probably a family day would actually help them. And right now they're finding themselves to be hindered. So I think the intent was that if a business wanted to open, that they could apply and therefore not be hindered at any time. And that was the intent of this, not to force vast swaths of businesses into opening. And as far as I understand, Kingston has this bylaw, but only has downtown open For instance, during special events, and most times they don't find that these retailers are open beyond their stay. But sorry, Mr. McDonald.
Mr. McDonald?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, I can't speak specifically to Kingston's experience. Theirs has been in place for some time, so what legislative framework they were permitted under is, from my perspective, unknown. Some municipalities have the ability to seek a tourism designation for a larger area. The current regulation that is attached to the Act has lots of requirements that set the bar very high and make it very difficult for a community like ours to satisfy a retailer that might be on the outskirts and have an LCBO attached. The proximity to a tourist attraction would be very difficult for the one in question. They're having an LCBO attached to another retail outlet makes it challenging for them because they cannot operate the LCBO unless they have an exemption from the current Act. You can't have two pieces of conflicting legislation, so it doesn't permit them to be open. They'd be in contravention of one piece of provincial legislation opening if we didn't have any bylaw exempting them. It does not make it mandatory to be open, but it would be challenging even if the City of Belleville, were to check all of the boxes to satisfy the province, have a public meeting, have two business owners or business owners make the application to start the process in the City of Belleville to get an area designated in proximity to a tourist attraction. My read of the Act and the regulation that requires all of those steps to be taken makes it very difficult for the city to check all of those boxes. The retailer that I'm aware of that has reached out to me a number of times wouldn't be permitted to be open under a bylaw in the City of Belleville, so they would still fall outside that area. So short of the city somehow petitioning the province for special consideration for a municipal designation, which may be an opportunity. There are some municipalities that are considered more tourist economy is more based on tourism as a whole that have that designation. Kingston's, I believe, is not municipal wide, so it may be related to the waterfront area and some of the designated tourist attractions, which they have a large number of scattered throughout the municipality, which probably gives them a broader area to designate. It's a challenge, without sugarcoating it at all. To get a designation in the City of Belleville will be a challenge.
Great, thank you.
And thank you. And are there any municipalities you're aware of who have obtained, municipal designation of a tourist area?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, I'm not. I know a couple that have sought designation, smaller ones with waterfront areas where generally their economy is based on a seasonal economy, but I'm not. In my research for this report, which was just based on the process, I looked at the process more than areas where they were designated. So what I'm looking at or thinking about is previous time where I worked at the province where people were seeking them, but not sure if anybody was successful or has one.
Okay. Again, based on this report and again based on some of those businesses, I would surely like to see a direction in which we at least look at that. I certainly feel that Belleville could benefit in a lot of ways, if there were other ways, from being designated a tourist destination. Surely if you look around the city today and see who is here, there's no doubt that we're a tourist destination, Quebec plates and what have you. I think for a lot of reasons we want to be a tourist destination, and certainly we sit in the middle of the Bay Quinte region that sees over 1.2 million visitors a year. I think what would be the process in which we would, as a council, ask or go to that route that we'd seek provincial designations of tourism area in this context?
Mr. McDonald?
Through the chair, there is no clear path. The Act and the regulation clearly speak to business owners starting the process through council, which triggers the steps in the regulation of a public meeting, notice all of those provisions that are outlined in the report. I would suggest that if we were to seek a designation of the entire municipality outside of the steps outlined in the regulation, it would take probably an act of a legislature, which is a political act. So that would be through a minister's order or a minister's act, and then an order in council. So I can look into that, but it's certainly not something that is prescribed in the regulation.
Okay, so as per the report right now, so if you can just let the public know, in order to be heard right now, there's an application process, is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, yeah, at this point, it would take business owners to begin the process by beginning, I mean, at this point, we don't have an application. It would be, the reg refers to an application to the municipality to start the process. I think what they're referring to is a request to the municipality, an official request that the municipality undertake the process to pursue the potential of a designated area, tourist area in the municipality.
Okay, so I guess as we're receiving this information today, this is more to the public, and I guess as councillors, we can, as the mayor, we can let the public know. If you're interested in this further, as we've received this for information, please contact the city and let the city know that you'd like to have the city designation as a tourist area and that you are interested in seeing your business open during statutory holidays. Thank you.
And I'd further suggest that if, I'm not sure which business you've been speaking to, but if they would like to reach out to me, and certainly I have opportunities throughout the year to speak with provincial ministers through the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus and elsewhere, and there are a number of exemptions, as Mr. McDonald has said, to allow for certain circumstances, and I think now is the time that all the rules are being thrown out to try to allow businesses to survive. That's always a good thing. So, anyone else on this item? Seeing none, all in favor, it's carried. 8B2, the City of Belleville Transportation Committee, Deputy City Clerk's Report Number DCC 2020-02, and the resolution is that the Council approve the recommendations of the Transportation Committee for those items outlined in the Deputy City Clerk's Report Number DC 2020-02, City of Belleville Transportation Committee. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Councillor Carr, this was your item.
Yes, thank you. Just two items that are outlined in the report, and there's this committee, as you're aware, being on the committee previous, is very busy. We get a lot of requests from the public. So one is the traffic calming policy that we get lots of concerns about ways and means we can slow down traffic. I raised the issue with provincial offenses with the chief of police, and because the time got cut short, I was going to mention the fact that I know for myself, almost on a daily basis, for about 2 weeks, the last 3 weeks, I was getting calls every day about speeding. And I'm sure that's a common theme that we hear. So at least having this plan, it might cost money down the road depending on what's implemented, and it'll have to be considered at the capital level, but certainly, or capital budget, but it's certainly good to have this policy. I know it's been discussed for many years. The other thing that I just wanted to highlight too in there is the fact that there's if a member of the public is looking at a reduction in speed or a stop sign, rather than emailing individual councillors and then going through the committee, there's a clear process for that requested change, which I think is important. So whether it's stop sign, yield signs, parking controls, speed limit, those three things, speed limit changes, could go through the city. I know that we're getting a new website here very shortly. It's going to contain a lot of information. It'll be easier for me to get information, as you referred to, than asking so many times for it, as you alluded in your speech. But in addition to that, it would be nice if this would be in a predominant location so that residents who reach out that want a speed limit change or want a change in terms of parking, that they can then go ahead and submit that, have the staff, and the way the process is, staff will do all the technical work behind it. The committee was kind of getting bogged down in a lot of these requests, so this is a clear and concise process in which to implement or request some of these changes. So as long as it's properly linked and available, because I get the impression that it seems to be one of the hot button issues, if you will, that residents care a lot about. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I think certainly having chaired that committee last term, we get a lot of residents that are concerned about speeding and stop signs, and we're working on our traffic calming policy, and it's coming along nicely. But in the meantime, there are people who, anecdotally feel that they're, I've got folks that are talking to me about a bus speeding over a very potholed road, and physically the bus can't be doing 80 kilometers an hour. It's uphill and a number of reasons, but until we get a speed spy out there, until they're able to get some statistical information, and we're seeing that it may seem like the vehicle's traveling at 80 kilometers an hour, but really it's below the speed limit or within the variance, it's something. I think I sent a request to the committee some time ago, but we should prepare ourselves. The province is going to allow all municipalities to use photo radar and red light cameras as soon as they work out some of those details. And when it comes to very scarce resources that our police service halved, and all the enforcement we have, particularly on what I consider to be low volume roads where people may be speeding, but there's not a lot of cars on them, and it just makes it difficult to put an officer there until they make those changes to the Police Service Act to allow us different processes. We should prepare ourselves, because I think that there are a number of intersections in the city that red light cameras are ideally to deal with that issue, and then at some point be able to do this photo radar. We have a problem across the city of some vehicles and some drivers are just going too fast. Over the last number of years, we've added bicycles, we've added pedestrians, we've added active transportation, and the vehicle is always going to win in a conflict between a pedestrian or a cyclist and a vehicle. And so we need to find a way to reduce that speed, because speed does kill. And so I thank the committee for their work on this, and that's a good point. I think a more clear process so we can direct residents to file a complaint or a request for a change in speed or anything else like that, that's the best way to go about it, because we become victims of our own success. And what I mean by that is, when we're successful in making a change to either put up a stop sign or deal with the speed change, more people start thinking that's the best route to come, and they come to us. And so I know the committee is dealing with a lot of them, and many of them are referred to from me when people reach out to me. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Anyone else on this? Councillor Sandison.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too want to touch on the traffic calming.
Great, thank you. Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a long overdue document. Here I go again, wandering down the halls of history, but I recall this issue was a hot button issue back in the term of the former Mayor Shirley Langer. And traffic calming measures to the point of what were formerly called sleeping policemen that are now speed bumps, shortening some or cutting off some lanes by building cul-de-sacs halfway into a lane in some areas. It never came to fruition. I'm happy to see that we've now got policies in place that can happen, particularly the neighborhood petition issue. I've gone to bat twice now for the some residents in the East Hill to remove, for instance, 18-wheelers from traversing, and if there's one example of dangerous cut-through traffic, it's 18-wheel, 53-foot tractor trailers cutting through from Canifton Road via Station Street to Emily down Bleecker, for God's sake, to get to Dundas. It's just a farce, but it's permitted right now. Hopefully we can get this changed. But I see the point assessment, the neighborhood petitions, data collection. It's good to finally get this codified, and I'm heartened to see this. So, and if it makes the life of the traffic committee people any better, so be it. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else on this? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. As chair of the committee, I'd just like to add a couple of things to it. One of the important parts of the terms of reference, and staff is here also, can speak on these, but the one big thing we made difference in the terms of reference is a lot of the requests came to the committee first, then we assessed it to whatever department, and now what we're doing is once that's received, it goes directly to that department, and then that department brings a report back to the committee. So what it's doing is eliminating some duplications. We talked about earlier about duplications. Now we can get these situations where people are concerned about stop signs, speed, and when it comes to speeding, a lot of that is going directly to the police department now, when they will report back to the committee on recommendations that they have for lowering the speed limit or other situations, or speeding, putting up the speed spies. So that's a big change for this committee as far as structure is concerned. So we can go back to, and it was taking up a lot of our time as a committee as we met dealing with those before it really got to the proper staff. So now we can eliminate that. The staff will bring it back and make those changes quicker so the public can get. And in the calming measures, I got highlighted, the goal of introducing traffic calming is to create safe and attractive roadways and promote active transportation and transit use in residential neighborhoods. The specific goal of this traffic calming policy are to develop and integrate sets of policies, objectives, and procedures will combine to form a set of overall working guidelines. This policy will also provide guidelines, procedures, and criteria for the initiation and investigation and executing of traffic measures calming. You know, we've talked about traffic calming measures. We've worked in this for a long time. Now we can start looking at the overall traffic pattern in our community as a committee. And by this bringing here, and I encourage the councillors to accept this, the terms of reference and the traffic calming policy, because it's a major step in our city. And yes, as the councillors that sit in the committee says, there will be costs involved in some of this, but that'll be in future for next year's budget. But we have had so many complaints about not enough stop signs, too many stop signs, too much speeding, and this now will hopefully try to combat some of that. So I encourage you to accept as chair, to accept the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Anyone else? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is to approve the recommendations. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. 8B4, update on accommodation of office space, City Hall second floor. It's the Director of Engineering and Development Services report number DEDS 2020-13. And the resolution is that the Director of Engineering and Development Services report number DEDS 2020-13, update on accommodation of office space, City Hall second floor, be received as information. Moved by Councillor Millette, seconded by Councillor Sandison. Councillor Millette, this was your item. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'm going to support receipt of this. I was heartened to see that after what seemed to be a little bit tilting at Windmill the last go-around, when 2 meetings ago, when at the budget time, when I asked that this be set aside, the atrium on the second floor of City Hall, as I look back over my shoulder here, as any of us do, may seem innocuous, but as I said at the time, it's an integral part of the overall design of this City Hall as it was intended and as it won awards back when it was constructed. Mr. Bill White, who, bless him, he's the architect that was responsible for this miraculous rendering of what was a two-story City Hall into what we see today. Was unaware that this was going to be, the atrium was going to be sacrificed in the interests of creating a few more cubicles of office space. He came down to City Hall, met with the mayor. I understand he had a great conversation with his worship, with Mr. Ashton. He saw the plans for the upgrades to our council chambers, which I should add for those of members of the public who think it may be exorbitant. This place hasn't been changed since it was built, so think about that in your own house. But my point was that I wanted to see some other thought given to maintaining that atrium, and I would urge anyone who comes into City Hall to just for a moment walk into the main floor in the clerk's area and just stand there and look upwards. And that was the idea, that if you stand there and you gaze upwards, you're going to look right on up through to the sky, and it was what made this place just so special. I mean, look at it. If you had been around to see what the council chambers looked like when it was a smoky, dusty old place down on the second floor before, it's nothing short of, as I said, miraculous that it was designed. So, long story short, Schultz and Zabak, who are going to be designing and working, the architects that are going to be doing the reworking of our council chambers, are going to be working to see if there can't be some other ways, possibly, as I see it. Am I correct, Mr. Ashton, that Mr. White will be providing, Bill White himself, the architect, notes and observations to staff, and staff will engage the services of Schultz and Zabak, who are overseeing the renovations of council chambers, to provide an analysis to determine if alternate solution for accommodations exists. So in other words, we're going to take a longer look at it, and I would hope with an eye of preserving what was an integral part of the redesign of this building. And again, for the sake of a few cubicles of office space, I would really like to see that feature retained. I think it's important, and in terms of not so much architectural preservation, because it certainly is a newish feature of the last 30 years, but it's a special part of this place, and I think it's our duty to protect this place in the way that we were brought to it, and in the way that still has public who walk in the door look up and marvel at. So I believe that, you know, it's our responsibility in any way, shape, or form to try and protect the initial design of the place. And once we start monkeying about with the design, it's a slippery slope to flooring off every level and just turning it into another big office building within a couple of atriums. So thank you. I'm heartened to see this, and I'm going to support receiving this report and look forward to future efforts to find alternative solutions for office accommodation. Sorry to mess up the plans, but I don't know, somebody's got to speak for this old building.
Thank you very much, Councillor Millette. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I certainly am going to accept this recommendation, is to look at all avenues. Only thing I'd like to point out in speaking to Mr. White, in here, and I think Mr. Ashton can come forward, and maybe Mr. Bill White has wrote a letter to Mr. Ashton with some of his concerns, as his name being used and his background in architect. So I'd like to bring Mr. Ashton forward and sort of clarify the situation so Mr. White doesn't get himself in trouble with the Architect Association. So Steve, Mr. Ashton, if you could sort of lighten us on the involvement. Mr. Bill White, he wants to be, he likes the idea, he was appreciative of being contacted. I spoke to him 2 or 3 times, given him copies of both the agendas, the one for today, and he had already wrote a letter, and Mr. Ashton will bring it. But again, we received another one because he was concerned. So, Mr. Ashton.
Director Ashton.
Okay, I think Mr. White did contact us. He had conversations with the mayor, with myself. He, was sort of looking at opportunities on the second floor. I think he said after reflection, he was going to step aside from the process. Of course, we write our staff reports in advance, well in advance of the meeting, so these are sort of events that happen between the writing of the reports, etc. He did indicate that he was very, very supportive of Ray Schultz to be the architect on the project, and as well, one of the things we did discuss was looking at, and while yes, there is the original heritage of the building, there's also the thing known as evolved heritage, and we did looking at elements of the renovation, whether they include the atrium or not, but having an update to the heritage designation bylaw come forward as well. That once we also confer with Mr. Schultz as well as a heritage professional to determine what that role of the atrium is and whether or not that's a significant feature of the renovations or not. And that'll come forward as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ashton. And again, just to say that Mr. White was certainly very supportive of Schultz and Zabak being the architect that we brought forward, because he complimented on what the renovations are going to be on this floor when Mr. White met with our mayor. And so it was only because of the situation with Mr. White. He's certainly stepping back, but wholeheartedly in agreement to Schultz and Zabak. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Millette.
Sorry, yes, I meant to add my initial. Mr. White and Councillor Thompson and I have discussed this. I spoke with Mr. White a couple of times, and anybody who knows Bill White knows that he just absolutely does not want to ruffle any feathers. And in this case, Bill White, while this is his baby and his passion, he realizes that, Schultz and Zabak are the architects of record, and I agree wholeheartedly that Mr. White has nothing to do in this term, but he made pains to tell me as well that he respects the work of the current architect and he will in no way interfere. But my point is, I'm just happy to see that at least Schultz and Zabak are putting their collective wisdom into trying to find a better way around this. And I mean, if in the end it has to go, it has to go. I won't vote to support it, and I won't like it whatsoever, but at least we've made the effort to try and find an alternative. So thank you.
Director Ashton, I know you talked about it in the report, but just an idea again about the timeline. So, at the last council meeting, we approved the funding envelope from the historic heritage building reserve fund that we have to take care of these things. So we've approved the funding envelope, but obviously any contracts have to come back to council for us to approve it, which is why we asked you to provide this report to us today. and then we wanted to make sure that we involved Mr. White, because while he's no longer a practicing architect, this building is full of his fingerprints and his DNA, and we wanted to give him the respect that he deserves. You know, he's doing such a great job, and so we want to have that input. Can you talk a little bit about just the, you know, if all things go the way they're supposed to over the next couple of years, what the process is about determining options, and when council will likely be able to see some ideas or what our proposal is?
Well, this is a sensitive issue, so.
Listen, if you don't, if you're
we
not
will.
prepared,
No.
say it.
We'll take our time. We've already had some preliminary discussions with the architect today, and one of the main elements will be looking at the interior layout of the second floor, and whether it's possible or not to accommodate the staff that we have under the new COVID regime. So that'll probably play a key role in it. So there's a lot of work from our end of things as staff as well as there. So I'd imagine later in the fall we'll have a better idea of what's required and what the requirements of the second floor are, as well as, you know, if there are alternatives to other spaces in this that the city owns, maybe there are those as well. But there's a lot to weigh, but we'll bring forward a fulsome report and give it the respect that it needs.
Yeah, good, thank you. And I'll just remind members of the public that may be watching, you know, the city has changed a great deal since 1988 when we did the renovations here at City Hall, and we have grown, and the services we provide have grown as well. And so we're trying to find a way to balance the historic integrity of this wonderful building that has won awards with also the need to provide services to residents. And this is just one of the options that we're looking at. But, you know, we've tinkered around the edges over the past number of years. What we're trying to do is take a longer term view. We know we will continue to see growth in our community, and we're just trying to set ourselves up in the best possible way to win. This may not be the route we want to go. We may choose to do something else, but this is sort of finding out a way, an option for us as we're going in. So thank you, Director Ashton, for being here. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. And so what we are doing is we are receiving as information this report. All in favor? Motion's carried. And again, just to ensure everyone understands, this does not mean anything has been decided. Any process to do work will require a tendering process that council will have an opportunity to consider, debate, amend, delete all the things that that we have at our availability. Okay, so we'll move on now to 8C, council information matters. That council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and council shall consider such items individually. Councillor Sandison? No. Councillor Williams?
No, thank you.
Councillor McCaw?
No, thank you.
Councillor Millette?
No, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
No, thank you.
Councillor Carr?
No, thank you.
Councillor Kelly?
No, thank you.
Councillor Culhane, I know you have one. 1B. All right. So, sorry? That the following agenda items be received, save and accept for 8C1B, moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Culhane. All in favor, it's carried. 8C1B, request for Premier Ford to start implementing long-term care home improvements, increased hours for part-time and casual labor, to inspect privately operated homes to see that they are properly run and funds are used to benefit residents, and 3, to end the neglect and unacceptable conditions. It is the June 22nd, 2020 resolution from the City of Sarnia, moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor McCaw. Councillor Culhane.
Thank you.
Want to hit the button, please? No, we're still in committee of the whole.
Thank you. I just want to remind people, I sit on the long-term care committee, and prior to COVID ever developing, this government came out with a plan entitled Ending Hallway Medicine. And it was a plan that would have added additional burden onto the backs of the caregivers at the bedside, the PSWs. It involved removing 300 the most difficult to care patients from hospital and distributing them across the province in long-term care homes over 170 patients. So that made it within the province of our long-term care home here, Hastings Manor. So that burden was not accompanied by additional staffing, was not accompanied by additional financing beyond $100 per patient per day. These patients required licensed professional care at the RN or RPN level. And the beginning of the report, it indicated that they required that level of care. Further on in the report, quite a ways on, it stated, or care as directed by a licensed professional. That effectively shifted that most difficult, complex care onto the shoulders of PSWs. The province, at the time of the delivery of that report to long-term care committees, was short 80,000 PSWs. This would have ensured that it would become short quite a few more. So not only do I support this, I think we all must be vigilant in seeing that focus on long-term care is maintained as a priority of this government. The situation that we're in is the result of years and years and years of government cuts. Our priorities must be reestablished, and our elderly must be placed in the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, and I just want to echo the comments of Councillor Culhane that certainly, you know, there's nothing more sacred than the dignity of the individual, and we have to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. And you know, having loved ones in long-term care and spent a lot of time there visiting, a lot of time helping because the staffing levels weren't where they should be. You know, if we don't take it upon ourselves to add to this collective voice, the changes won't occur. And when we've heard, you know, reports, and I know that it's caught the attention of the provincial government because of the fact the military were involved, got to see firsthand what was going on. You know, certainly we need to add our collective voice. And I appreciate the members around this table that sit on long-term care, because this is not the first time that Councillor Culhane has brought this forward. Councillor Sandison has brought forward the issue of the time when it came to care for PSWs. And we have to continue to put that message out there to advocate for seniors. You know, and then the other side of it is, and I know it's jokingly said, but it's all true, we are all going to be there someday. And, you know, I can't envision myself living in that condition. And certainly as I saw some loved ones in those conditions as well. And you know, don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad, but there was a level that could have been increased that just wasn't there. And so certainly I endorse this resolution wholeheartedly.
Councillor Thompson, I see your hand up. No, anyone else? Councillor Kelly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Culhane and Councillor Carr had to say. I too am a member of the Long-Term Care Committee for Hastings County, and I think if there's anything that COVID-19 has taught us is that the work that goes inside the Centennial Manor in Bancroft and Hastings Manor here in Belleville. Those residents are cared for with A+ staff. I know Hastings County have had weekly updates on what's happening at Centennial Manor and Hastings Manor here in Belleville, and quite a few of the councillors at the table participate in that weekly update. So I support this. I'm glad Councillor Culhane brought this to the forefront, and thanks to the City of Sarnia. We can only continue to do more because those folks have done so much for us, and anybody, as Councillor Carr touched on, has family members in a nursing home setting. I think I speak for everyone. The employees inside there have their work cut out for you, and finally they're getting their rewards. And it took a pandemic for people to take note of the good work that they do. So Thanks to Councillor Culhane for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Worship. Purely in summary, at one time in my lengthy past, I represented Hastings Manor. I was the president of the then Local 58. I was more than aware of the workload issues. And you still file workload complaints. That is the mechanism. 25 years later, whatever, nothing has changed. You file workload complaints. People have attempted for years, union leaders, staff, workload complaints. It simply was not being paid attention to. Individual families who made a lot of noise got prompt attention. That simply wasn't good enough then. It isn't good enough now. I can't say it often enough. This is a terrible way to bring this to the forefront, but it's there now, and we have to keep it there.
All right, thank you. And as has been said, thank you to the members that sit on the Hastings County Long-Term Care Committee. I did thank the Premier when I spoke to him for the fact that they had provided additional resources to Hastings County for us to provide our long-term care facilities, which made a huge difference for us in our budget, as I was explaining why we were able to do that. And he has committed that they have more they're doing when it comes to long-term care homes. So we will wait to hear more of that. The motion is on the floor. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Motion to rise and report. Moved by Councillor Culhane, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? It's carried. We'll now move to bylaws. Before we do that, can I just, Mr. Reid, can I just speak to you quickly at the end here? I just want to ask you a quick question. All right, first reading of bylaws 2020-144, which is a bylaw to regulate traffic within the corporate limits for Bell Boulevard, and bylaw 2020-145, the bylaw to approve the conveyance of land and execution of the deed to Habitat for Humanity. First reading, moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor McCaw. All in favor, it's carried. Second reading of bylaw 2020-144 and 2020-145, moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Millette. Discussion on these bylaws. Seeing none, I have a couple things I just want to say. So I don't believe this week, the following week, Council will be getting an invitation to attend the ribbon cutting of the set of lights at the intersection where the Shorelines Casino and Bell Boulevard is. And we will be having our federal and provincial colleagues there who were successful in getting us some great funding for that. So I'm expecting that that'll happen next week. But as I mentioned earlier, what I think is the most important bylaw or important business we conduct today is going to be to convey a second parcel of land to Habitat for Humanity in as many years. We made a commitment that we felt that affordable housing and that one of the ways that we can help residents in the city of Belleville was to work with organizations like Habitat for Humanity. And today we are making true on our commitment. Again, this is the second piece of property in 2 years. We should be giving a land every year. Prior to this council, it had been as long as when Ross McDougall was mayor that the last time the city had given property to Habitat for Humanity. So I think it's a great step. I know that the executive director, Mr. May Anderson, is in the audience. This parcel in particular is going to allow. I'm having a brain cramp. Andy Gertzma, thank you, from Gertzma Homes and his partners to donate a existing home which is on the west side of Sydney Street. They're going to be able to relocate that to this lot, which will be much less expensive and much less work to provide an immediate home for a family. But they are thinking they'll be also able to get additional homes on this on this lot as they go through it. So what a great way to be able to recognize not just the housing crisis we're in, but taking concrete steps to make this donation. So thank you, Council, all of our staff that have made this happen, and of course the good men and women at Habitat for Humanity. I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Third and final reading of bylaws 2020-144 and 145. Moved by Councillor Millette, seconded by Councillor Sandison. All in favor? It's carried. New business. Just before I open it up to the floor, I want to just talk about some breaking news that happened today at 1 o'clock, where the Premier announced the beginnings of the $4 billion municipal announcement for the province of Ontario and municipalities, which is the result of a lot of work. I want to thank Council for supporting the Association of Municipalities of Ontario as well as the Canadian Federations of Municipality resolution for that $10 billion financial aid project. Matter of fact, it was $19 billion, which has come out now. And because it's more than just municipal services, there's also some healthcare services and transit. But I also, in addition to thanking Council, I want to thank the organizations and the residents who supported us in our request for some assistance from the federal and provincial governments, including from the Quinte Labour Council. And earlier this month, I received a letter from President Marg Bourgoin of the Quinte Labour Council, in which he said, "Dear Mayor Panchuk and councillors, as you are well aware, municipal workers are on the front lines going flat out to deliver the public services that keep us safe during COVID-19. However, responding to this pandemic has left municipal governments in a financial crisis. Their revenues have collapsed and anticipated costs are soaring. Without financial help, cities will be forced to cut the vital local services of our families and communities, which they rely on every day. On top of that, our cities are major economic drivers, and this financial crisis is a threat to Canada's economic recovery. All other levels of government must up and provide financial support to our cities." It went on to have a motion, which they passed and sent to the provincial government, that supported the City of Belleville to get the federal and provincial governments to provide emergency operating funds to protect vital local services, including public transportation and emergency services. This afternoon, Premier Ford announced broad details about the federal and provincial funding agreement for Ontario municipal governments in Ontario. The province, in partnership with the federal government, under the Safe Restart Agreement, will be providing up to $4 billion in one-time emergency assistance to all of Ontario's 444 municipalities, aimed at maintaining critical services, including public transit, over the 6 to 8 months. The funding announcement includes $777 million from the federal government and about $1.22 billion from the provincial government that will be targeted towards operating municipal relief. And the provincial amount already includes some of the previously announced social services and public health funding that was there. In addition, there will be $2 billion that will be going towards transit, and there will be more announcements on that moving forward. So, you know, we're looking forward to hearing the details about how we will receive those funds. But obviously, it was a good day. As I mentioned at our last council meeting, Premier Ford was adamant that the split or the ratio of these funds would recognize Ontario's 38% share of the population of Canada, and he was successful. And you know, it's sometimes focus and hard work pays off. And I think this was one of those cases. So we will have more details for council when Director Hines is able to analyze it. But that is a good step for us and a good way to start off the week. Anyone else for new business today? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I talked to our CEO earlier, and there's a couple of things that come up, and I'm not clear on whether we're following through for it. And one's with the fire pits regulations in our community. I don't know whether anything's ever happened with that. And the other one is the possibility of citizens of Belleville be able to have chickens in their backyard. And I know that was talked about. I just want an update. That's sort of a funny one, but whether there's any further updates coming forward to it, I don't expect maybe an answer today, but maybe our CEO can say maybe what's coming forward.
All right, Mr. Bove.
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, I'm not aware of anything that's happening with respect to the issue of fire pits in residential areas. I'll have to check with our folks at the fire service to see where that's at. On the issue of backyard chickens, again, it's an issue that's come up before council previous terms. They have been studied quite intently in numerous municipalities. Some are allowing them, some aren't. I believe at the current time, the city's Green Task Force is looking at the issue, and I can certainly check with Director DeCola and see where they're at with that particular issue.
Thank you very much.
No, it's timely because we continue to get emails from residents who are looking for a fowl and swine bylaw to allow for those types of animals in our communities, and they told us it would be fun to run for council. We get to deal with all kinds of wonderful issues, right? So,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Culhane.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up to Councillor Thompson, through you, if I may, the backyard fire pits, I don't think a lot of people realize that they're not legal, that they have to be within 50 feet, and that if you generate a smoke complaint that results in a fire truck being dispatched, you're going to pay for that complaint. I think people should be aware of that.
And
thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. There's a lot of questions in our community. I get asked once in a while, what's the regulations? I'd like to have one, but unless we have it spelled out that you're allowed, you're not allowed, and I'm sure we debated this and asked the fire chief to bring some recommendations, but Councillor Culhane, you're absolutely correct. There is regulations right now,
yeah.
But what I'm saying is people are wanting to have them, so can we change that and have fire pits? So I know there's regulations right now.
But what do we do with a fire pit when there's backyard chickens?
There might be quite a fire going on. We'll have breakfast for supper then.
All right, Councillor Culhane, you had something for new business?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The issue of fireworks on the East Hill. I live on Charles Street, and we have been pounded unmercifully for a number of nights by people who see fit to set off quite loud arrays of fireworks later in the evening. They're disturbing children, they're disturbing pets, they're disturbing senior people, they're disturbing everybody. And I've been called several times, and I live there, and I've heard them, and I've gone out, and it's hard to focus on where they are to make any call. Someone's mentioned Albion Street, and that may be the focus. The issue is that the complaints are heard, and they're valid, and they're understood, and they're appreciated. But council cannot regulate bad behavior. I wish we could. The police advice is to call 911 for every event. So I'm just asking people to please do that. That's the mechanism that we've been directed to use. That's what I was told.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, on new business, I think you were one of the most enthusiastic supporters of fireworks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I like fireworks. Not like Councillor Williams, I recall. He voted against supporting fireworks. If we go down. Anyway, I just want to pick up what Councillor Culhane said about fireworks. Some of the neighbors in the West End have reached out to me. They love fireworks. However, at 11 o'clock, 11:30 or midnight or 1 in the morning, fireworks are going off. They can't sleep. The dogs are barking. It's chaos. And this is going on far too often. And I did speak to the Belleville Fire Department about it. And I did call back a couple of the folks that had reached out to me. And I find myself, when I hear the fireworks, I go to my room and put on my Team Canada jersey, and then I realize it's not July 1st. But I can see that mistake happening a lot with people. So let's just get back down to respect. Think of your neighbors. If it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, maybe it's not a good idea to start having fireworks. So it goes back to respect and common sense. Thank you.
Right. Good. Okay, motions. Councillor Millette, we have 11.1. If you want to read the motion, then I'll get a seconder and then we can discuss it.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I get it seconded, there will be an amendment. But the motion is that Council establish a community forum to directly hear from the people who have reached out to us, seeking a dialogue about policing, ways in which the police are funded, and how they are called upon to deal with matters related to mental health and addictions issues, as well as including in the discussion members of council, police, various community agencies whose specialty include mental health and addictions. And I don't know to bring the amendment now or once
well, let's get it seconded. Do you have it in writing, Councillor Millette?
I do.
Can I just see a copy of it, and then I'll let you
I just
read it out, please?
Penciled it in at the end of the motion.
Matt, you want to just take a look at it with me? So actually, if you just want to make that an amended motion, Councillor Sanderson, you second it. It's a pretty straightforward one.
And
if you just want to add that.
I'll just read it now, as well as including representatives or elected members of senior levels of government. So
okay. You're good
basically
with that? Okay.
having them at the table.
So Councillor Millette on debate, if you can just stand up, please.
Thank you. I will
go ahead.
I will briefly go over what I said in a lengthier introduction to this motion at my notice of motion last week. We were all, in the last couple of months, part and parcel with a larger discussion that centered around, I believe, Black Lives Matter, that morphed into calls for quote-unquote defunding police. But what it largely, in our area, I believe centered on, and the chief spoke at length about in his budget presentation, where there were calls to take 10% from our police force, and I don't think it received any support around this table because of the budget itself was set. We had no legislative means to adjust that budget whatsoever. So two things: we couldn't. The other was it's a much broader discussion than simply lopping a token 10% off the top of any budget. But the larger story is, and this is where I believe police are actually in agreement with us, and a lot of the people who reached out to us, is that fully 40% or more of the calls that they're dealing with now are a result of people suffering mental breaks and addictions. And it's unworkable. The police didn't sign up for it. They're not trained for it. And there are examples of how other municipalities are dealing with this, and there's several. And what I hope to do, if and when we can create this community forum, it's a way to hear from the people who are on the front lines, including police, mental health workers, all the agencies that deal in this regard, how they would like to see us help bring about change. And it's going to be grassroots, because we're not the only community struggling with this. We need senior levels of government to have buy-in on this and help work with us to make this better. This is in no way a backdoor way. This is a community forum. This is no way a backdoor way to introduce defunding police, although that will come up in this discussion. But the point is, we have to have the discussion. We were elected on a mantra of a self-proclaimed open and inclusive council. I think it's incumbent on us in that mantra to listen to the people who put us here. Do we like what some of the people are going to say to us? No. Are they going to say some things that are pretty harsh about our police? Probably. We've seen them in the emails and the social media. But that's unfortunately where the discussion had been up until now, was in social media that got crazy ugly at some points. It was in emails that veered into bumper sticker sloganeering, and that's no way to have a discussion. We need a discussion that's going to include all angles of this, and it's a crisis. It really is a crisis in our municipalities. But I'm calling for this forum. When and how we're going to do it, we'll have to see. COVID restrictions clearly don't mean we can call a meeting at the sports center and fill the gym with 1,000, 1,200 people. We have to figure out how and when we might be able to do this. Doing it online, I think, is unworkable. But again, we can work out the logistics. All I'm asking council for today is to support this, and I have an awful lot of people that have reached out to me since I brought this notice of motion, including one woman who actually brought a letter. She actually asked to physically be in the chamber today, Ms. Carrie Young. She's got some things to say. She'll have her opportunity at this forum if we allow the people to speak. I think we owe it to the people to have this dialogue, and we owe it to the more vulnerable in our community to let them know that we are willing to try and find ways to work with our senior levels of government to get it done. We absolutely have to get it done. Finally, listening, truly listening to all sides of the discussion has always been intrinsic to my career as a journalist, and it's no more so important now as an elected official that we listen to all sides of the story. So I'm asking council to support a community forum to discuss this. Police, I believe, will, I've reached out to Deputy Chief Callahan, Inspector Sherry Meeks. Great things are actually happening on that front. Sandy Sidsworth with the Enrichment Center for Mental Health, of which Councillor Thompson and I are long-serving members on that. We understand where the needs are. We have to get, as we've said all along, and I'm sure you support this, Mayor Panchuk, more buy-in from our senior levels of government, but we've got to start with the discussion. So I'm asking you to support this motion to open the dialogue. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Millette. Councillor Sandison. He's
Behind every man is a good woman. Sorry, I got lost in my thought. Thank you, Councillor McCaw, for helping me. I'd like to thank Councillor Millette for his leadership on this issue. I think what started out as a defund the police and really a misunderstanding or a perception problem around how the police services are funded. As a council, as a municipal council, when a police force brings their budget forward, council has two options. They have the option of accepting it or sending it back for rework. But we don't have the ability to go in and dice and slice the data and challenge some of the buildup in that budget. But I think what Councillor Millette said when Police Chief was here and went through the budget, it became pretty apparent that the underlying issue really is mental health. And so to create a forum where we're going to look at or listen to the various stakeholders, and certainly we need provincial and federal representation, whether it's there from the onset or gets built in once the group has had a chance to formulate their thoughts. I think it's all good stuff, and I 100% support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCaw.
Thank you, through you. So in principle and wholeheartedly, I do agree there are resources needed for mental health, especially where the increased calls for policing are concerned. although I have a little bit of a sticking problem, is that it becomes the responsibility of Belleville City Council. A few weeks back, we had a nice deputation at the Police Services meeting with Inspector Meeks, along with Sandy Sidsworth. They were talking about the new Health IM app, and they're already collaborating, they're already working together. The problem becomes, how can they do it, and how can they have funding to do it? There are other things such as the situation table approach that deals with mental health issues as well. I believe now Inspector Meeks is getting some funding for her app. I call it her app because she had sort of spearheaded it. She's getting that from the LIN, the Local Health Integrated Network. But it's not a guarantee that she'll continue to get it. So clearly they need some provincial help here. I don't feel that we're the purse for the provincial government. And I absolutely know there's nothing in that police service budget. We can't sustain a cut. I've got it in front of me. I sit on the budget committee. There's nothing there to give. In the motion, you mentioned a forum with some of the members we heard from. The members I heard from, obviously, should I say, I'm going to call it their public manifesto, shall we say, with phrases like this. And this is what concerns me about what you're suggesting. I'm writing today to call on you to take meaningful action in response to the outrageous abuse of power and racial sensitivity demonstrated by police across North America. I'm calling for the defunding of the police services by 10%, as well as a reduction in the Belleville Police capital budget. The very concept of policing was established to protect the interests of the wealthy. So this is what we're dealing with. The demand for a creation of a police-free community led trauma-informed emergency services for mental health. The demand for creation of a civilian conflict resolution service to replace policing. Then we have other statements in this manifesto. If you choose to believe defunding doesn't apply to Belleville, that racism and prejudice isn't a problem here, you choose defensiveness over accountability. We demand. And finally, these are just little excerpts out of the mass form email we all received several times over, to which I call the manifesto. Additionally, I'm calling on City Council to reduce the operating budget of the Police Service Board by 10%. Now, you know, the concept is good for mental health, but I feel the group we're hearing from has an ulterior motive, and it doesn't include mental health. It's solely about defunding the police and cutting of the institution of policing by 1,000 cuts. That's what I feel about this. It's a dangerous principle. It's one that I will continue to advocate against, and I've heard loud and clear from some of these individuals who I've investigated myself. Many of them aren't even residents of our community. So I don't answer to those people, I answer to those in my community. Mental health is one thing, defunding the police is another. I think it's time we need to separate those two. Maybe your forum does that, I'm not sure. But I just feel like this is an opportunity to quell the noisemakers. And I don't want to, I'm not going to take demands from noisemakers. I'm going to take demands from the people I represent as a whole. And the people that I represent do not believe in police defunding. I will support your forum in that regard, but I feel very questionable about some of the groups you're asking to come because I feel their motives aren't pure. So, you know, I'm sitting on the fence, Councillor Millette, and I don't know whether I can support the forum because I truly believe this should be a provincial mandated forum, and maybe we should be included as councillors, but let's maybe leave this in the provincial forum where it belongs. That's sort of how I feel about it, but I do, you know, think your motion is pure, and I believe you want to do good, and I think that in principle I agree with that. However, the way in which we deliver this forum is concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCaw. Councillor Culhane, then Councillor Thompson, and then Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I also support Councillor Millette's initiative, and I appreciate that solutions to problems begin with discussion. What I have difficulty with in this circumstance is the strident, numerous, demanding tone that the emails consisted of, And the fact that I continuously responded with an invitation to sit down with me, one-on-one. I don't know how many such invitations I issued. I had 3 responses. One was a young woman who was willing to meet with me. She's local. We had a very good discussion, close to 2 hours. We both enjoyed it, and we learned a great deal from one another. The second was a lady, perhaps closer to the 50 range. We had a lengthy discussion on the phone. We made an appointment to meet, and then she texted me and told me that she had had such a fulsome discussion with the mayor that she no longer felt that she should take my time, that he had answered her questions sufficiently. The third person was a young man, I believe, from Montreal. And there were some issues associated with the conversation that I had with him and with further information that surfaced about him that would lead me to retract my invitation to sit down with me. So that's 3 responses, 1 meeting. I have no idea how many similar emails. Yes, I'm happy to sit down. I'm happy to start at the beginning with anyone who's willing to sit down with me. This is a big undertaking, the way that it's formatted. I support the principle. I don't support the motion as it's written, but I do believe that Councillor Millette had mentioned there might be an amendment, so I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Yeah, just before, because I'm going to give everyone one chance to speak to this, Councillor Culhane. The motion is amended, and his amendment was to add that representatives of the provincial and federal senior government levels be there as well. So again, if I know you said you were going to wait for to hear the amendment, I wanted you to hear it if you have anything else you want to say.
Thank you. I apologize. He did add that, and I agree with Councillor McCaw. Without provincial backing, at least, the conversation really, to me, is without focus. We cannot interfere with the police budget, nor should we be implying that we will interfere with the police budget. They only have control over 10%, so I guess we intend to take away even that. Again, the principle is sound. I guess I thought there was a further amendment coming. In its present format, I apologize, Councillor Millette, but I just can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Culhane. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support the motion. Over the years, when the police have come to the podium for their budget, I've always said to them, do you have enough money in your budget for mental health? That's not only for the people that are out there in the community, but for the staff to be able to be trained to deal with mental health. So to think that we're going to defund the police, and this really isn't part of the motion. It may be stated in there, the dialogue about defunding, but there's nothing in there that says that we're going to defund the police. And I'm very adamant that mental health is a serious problem as a community. As Councillor Millette says, we both sit on the Enrichment Centre for Training in Mental Health. We see it firsthand there, the actual demand for mental health in this community. But if you look at the forum in itself, when we first got elected in this term, the first thing we did was do a forum on housing. Did we get some bad emails before the housing summit was brought? Yes, we did. From citizens, from here, from outside of the community, and we dealt with it. We didn't hear any dialogue. We don't want to hear those comments. We need to hear those comments. And we had the housing forum. Are we doing something about it? Yes, we are. Has it cost us a lot of money? No, it hasn't. But we've engaged in the community to make sure that we have housing in our community, not only for the homeless, for the mental health, and even just for our regular people that don't have mental health issues in our community. We're trying to institute housing in our community. And that was the objective of the housing forum. This, again, is going to bring some dialogue together. I commend Councillor Millette for bringing it forward. It's a great opportunity. Did I question it at first? Yes. But when you look at it, we're going to bring a lot of community people together to bring some dialogue. Will we get some answers? Yes, I hope we do. We may not get the answers we want or we're looking for, but unless we have dialogue with the community, we did it with the housing forum, we can do it with the mental health issues and the funding with the police. We did it once, we can do it twice. That's our objective as the councillors, is to make sure we fulfill our mandate as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Councillor Matt, thank you for putting the motion together. It says here to establish a community forum to directly hear from the people who have reached out to us seeking dialogue about policing, ways in which the police are funded. There's also talks about mental health, addictions issues, and various community agencies all coming together. And I think any conversation about mental health in any community is the right thing to do. I strongly encourage my colleagues here on council to go spend a day with Christy Reeve, who is a public health nurse and on a daily basis with the Hastings Prince Edward Public Health goes around and checks in on 60+ homeless folks in our community. This conversation's bigger than the police. It's go to the Gleaners Food Bank, go to the Bridge Street United Church. I know there was a certain tone with the Not Alone team when they came into town and they set up at the Market Square. But when you look back over 2 years, and I'm passionate about this, maybe we got it wrong. When Debbie, Lee, and her team now are serving over 90 people a day, maybe we got to sit back and take a look and say, are we doing enough? I've heard the conversation now for 2 years. We heard the police issue come to the forefront in the last 3 months. We know what COVID's done for business, but what has it done to families? I sit back and I listen and I read. Mental health now is rampant, as Councillor Thompson talked about. Education, school boards don't know what's ahead of them when students come back to school. Talk to parents that now, for the first time, I spoke to a guy today that went to work for the first time in 4 months. And for 4 months, he worked at home with a 7- and a 4-year-old. And he tried to continue to do his job and manage his children where they couldn't go out, didn't have access to daycare. That's the reality that people are living in. And when I see the homeless and the vulnerable in our community, it's mental health at the forefront. Do the police need more support? Yes. Has the game plan in policing changed? Yes. We see what's happening down in the United States over the last 8 to 10 weeks. That is also happening here in Canada at a smaller scale, but it's still happening. And I applaud Councillor Millette. It is time to get the conversation going. Enough. We are a community of compassion and empathy. I want the best. That young individual, male or female, that's homeless is someone's son or daughter. Last week I was back in Maranatha Church. There was 3 people living in the woods. Jen is 31 years old, lost her way. 3 children, 10, 8, and I believe 4. And we can blame other things, and Jen made some mistakes on the way, but Jen's in our community. I left there taking a different perspective again. She hasn't seen her children in 2 years. Thank God that she has her mother living in Belleville and as a grandmother raising those children. But Jen's addicted to drugs. She wants to see her kids. She wants to get a job. She wants to get out of this lifestyle. Maybe she snowed me for the 1-hour conversation I had. But I believe she wants support and help. We really have to do this. And this conversation, by bringing in the other leaders in our community, we can also see where their strengths are. Trust me, as a trustee for 4 years, I saw it all the time in school. It happens all the time. Too many young people are taking their lives because of mental health, because they don't know where to turn to. Yes, I might be going on a tangent here tonight, but I feel passionate about this, and it hurts me every day when I see someone walking the streets of Belleville What is the connection to Grace Inn? What programs do they have in place that when someone goes to stay there, they take that individual and say, here's the game plan. What is the plan? It has to be more than just an overnight location. It has to be. What is the plan for that individual? Those are my thoughts. I'm going to support this 100%. Councillor Millett.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. And I just want to echo the comments around the table. I applaud the motion here. We've talked about mental health. We've talked about addictions. Back when the addiction center was being relocated from Front Street over off of South Church. And I talked about one individual who is using that program to get back on their feet and is back to work. And that's what they want. And you know, I'm 24 years in the criminal justice system, and I see it on this one end of where I work. And I can tell you that people make choices, but once they get in that cycle of addiction, it is extremely difficult to break without the support around it. Mental health, we've heard that there's been fragmentation in our society for years. And when you look at the fact that years ago mental facilities were closed, what was the default? The correctional system. And that's where I see it every day. And what happens is in the community, the police become the default. And I have, certainly in my career, I have lots of friends who are frontline police, and they'll be the first ones to tell you they don't want to be called for the mental health case because they will be tied up for hours and hours and hours. Because the problem is this: you're dealing with the immediate crisis, then the individual is taken to the hospital, but the hospital is going to take time to admit that person. Therefore, that person has to remain in the custody of the police. And so that police officer or officers is now tied up and cannot be out in the street doing the job that they're intended to do. And so that's some of the tie-in with the police. The other matter, you know, some of that could be just noise. Some of it is, you know, in terms of systemic discrimination. There are issues in government, and there are issues in organizations of which are created by government. We should be listening. You know, we're elected as leaders, and we need to lead. And I've often said the best way that I can represent the people that put me here, or maybe didn't put me here, but I'm still here to represent them, is to hear from them. And that's the best opportunity. And so by hearing from them, we're not committing to anything. The fact that Councillor Millett talks about ways in which police are funded, because I think there needs to be some public education. You know, Councillor McCaw refers to, you know, this is how the budget works, and we can't just cut, and Councillor Sanderson has said the same thing, and we've all echoed the same thing. And if you're a new councillor, you get that speech from the chair of the police service board or the chief, for that matter. So I think some public education, and certainly there's some passion out there. I think having that conversation and showing that the leadership around this table wants to listen is a good thing. And now we can shovel it off to the provincial government, because that's where the Police Service Act lies, and that's where the Mental Health Act lies. But we just spent some time talking about long-term care, which is also a provincial matter, of which we can say that the Health Act and long-term care is a provincial matter. But we're advocating for the seniors. So why aren't we advocating for those that are suffering with addiction and those that are suffering from mental health? And if you talk to people who work in that sector, they'll tell you that what's missing is the holistic approach. You have this group trying to catch a group through here. You have this group trying to catch over here. When I mean catch, I mean to help. And then those that fall through fall to the police and then fall to the criminal justice system. And we're not benefiting as a community by this fragmented approach. So by having the conversation, understanding clearly what the needs are on addiction, what the needs are on mental health, what the needs and the concerns are regarding discrimination, we might as well hear it because it exists. Then we can at least have the dialogue to start advocating to other levels of government for change. And if we're gonna, if we take leadership on this for that change, then I think that's a good thing. So I commend Councillor Millette. I think this is an opportunity. If and when we can make this happen with COVID, hopefully we can become creative, but I think it's an opportunity. One thing I would suggest, and I know there's concerns of hearing from people that are outside our community, just have people register and they have to have an address within the city of Belleville. And then therefore they can have standing in this particular issue. So that kind of weeds out the career protester, if you will, and just deals with our community as it stands. So I think this is a good opportunity to have a dialogue, and I'm looking forward to listening and learning, and I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship, and not a lot left to say. I think I support this wholeheartedly. 2020 has been kind of a garbage fire when it comes to everything that's happening, but it has given us the opportunity as a council to relook at our community. I think it could be said right now that municipal government is becoming more important every year, and probably because certain things have been downloaded to the municipality. I mean, as a municipality and council, we've talked about it even tonight, the amount of issues that we need to deal with that have never traditionally been council issues: healthcare, mental illness, homelessness, housing, economic development. All these things that used to be the greater government have been downloaded slowly and surely. And when we come to a year like 2020, when we have these things pop out, it becomes more prevalent that it is an issue of municipal government, because we are left to deal with it. There's no one under us. We're the ones. Listening is the first thing we need to be doing. And we've already been doing it, and we've been doing a good job with housing and a lot of other issues that have come to council. But this is a definite one that's sticking out, something that we need to do. I myself have sat down with several constituents who have talked about the problems they face. Constituents who aren't like us, who are black and colored, who are saying they see discrimination. They're feeling it in our town. And who are us to say at white privilege that we don't see it, or we don't, because we aren't them. We don't see it. And I think it's important that we do listen and we do act for them as councillors and because they're our constituents. But I think, more importantly, as we've stated tonight with economic development, it's up to us with action. We're not going to have all the resources. We don't have extra money to put into the police budget. We certainly don't have all the money to solve all the problems, but we can advocate for them. We can stand up and say, this is not right, or we need to change that. I think, as several councillors have said tonight, it's the listening part that's the most important, then it's the action after that. And it's including everyone. I'll restate, the Not Alone team, I think, is doing an incredible job in our community. I think sometimes as councillors, it's up to us to listen more. Listen to more and make sure that we understand what's happening. We understand the problems that people are facing, not just before COVID, but after COVID especially. And I think as a council, we just do the best we can to listen. I think this is a great start, and I look forward to looking at how we can tackle mental health and housing and more after we listen to these groups. But thank you very much, Councillor Millette.
Councillor Culhane, did you have another comment you want to make before we wrap this up? Very quickly, yes.
I'd just like to speak to a couple of those points. This is great debate. This is what I really enjoy, and it brings out the different opinions. We can't all get together in a room whenever we'd like to because the law precludes it. I'd like to make a couple of points. Housing, when I asked social services for a definitive number, percentage, on how long the wait was for a one-bedroom apartment as recently as about a week ago, the wait on that particular date was 19 years. So let's look at reality. 19 years is a movable figure, but absolutely the wait is 12 years. So we need to talk specifics and what is achievable. Nat broke rules. Nat had no accountability for donations, particularly financial donations, no accountability, no books, nothing. So the motivation was good, but the action was poorly planned and poorly carried out. Now they are feeding the poor as well as the homeless. And the number of homeless is a movable figure. I have been on the same tour as Councillor Kelly. I haven't been there with Christy Reeve, but I intend to go. Individual stories are heartbreaking, and it's taken me a lifetime of working with disadvantaged people and serving disadvantaged people to understand that you cannot get mired down in the individual circumstances. The reality is that we are buckling under the strain of providing for the reality that mental health and poverty issues are outstripping the ability of our taxpayers to carry the burden. As much as I would love to solve, and I think we all would, all of the sad stories in the city, we needed to focus on our own needs before, in my opinion, we opened a shelter. Now we have needs coming from other communities as testified to by the Chief of Police. We can't meet our own needs. The realities have to be faced, and I do support Councillor Millet's intent, and I will support his motion. I just would like to start on a smaller scale. Perhaps he and I could sit down with the applicant at some point in time. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Culhane. So, Councillor Millet, I'll make some comments and I'll allow you to wrap up as is your motion. Ironically, or not ironically, but interestingly, a couple weeks ago on my latest Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus meeting, we were discussing our delegation requests for the virtual Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference, and we spoke about this issue, and I spoke about the IM app that the Belleville Police Service is doing, and how we really need to see some changes in the Police Service Act, because the responsibility that we're having to execute was never intended to be borne by municipal property taxes. And that's one of the challenges. And so I think I'm going to be actually presenting on that issue to the Solicitor General and the Attorney General on that. But it's something that it's not just happening in Belleville, I guess is the point I want to make. This is occurring in Prescott. Mayor Todd asked us to have Inspector Meek send our information to them, because while they are policed by the OPP, they were very interested in this app that would help speed up the process. And Inspector Meek's statistics about taking an hour off a call, it makes a huge impact when you consider the fact that there are 24,000 calls a year that the police are responding to. So, we're not alone. This is happening in Cornwall, in Brockville, in Prescott, Toronto, everywhere. And certainly we had heard about the defund the police movement before, and I know this is not about that, but we had heard about comments about the fact that police forces, throughout the world, certainly in Ontario and in Canada, were not effectively dealing with certain situations. And I think that with the events that have occurred in the United States in the last 3 or 4 months, also in Canada, where we've had some fatalities when police were investigating, this has sort of brought this into, I don't want to say a frenzy, but much more attention to it. And then when you add to it the allegations about members of our own police service by certain people in the community, and there's a process that the Police Act requires the Belleville Police Service to go through, and members of council as part of that, it just sort of became all this information. And I can say that of all the emails I've ever received on council, I'm getting the most on policing, defund the police, police conduct than anything else. And I know that you are as well as members of council. But what I'm finding, which is difficult, and it's not really so much about your motion, Councillor Millet, but it's the challenge we're going to have to deal with as we deal with your motion, because I support it. The challenge I'm finding is the sheer level of anger that exists. Some of it absolutely deep set. It's based because of people's experience with prejudice and discrimination and inequity and unfairness. And you can't help but be angry when you're treated that way, and I understand that. But also, just I think with everything that's been going on in the world, including the isolation and the powerlessness that we all feel because of the COVID-19 situation, it has just really polarized the issue. And so, it hasn't helped having a good discussion about what we do. Fact is, the City of Belleville has long called on changes to the Police Service Act So we could stop spending the money that we spend on police calls, and so that it can be spent better ways, including dealing with mental health. That's a fact. It's a long-standing fact. And until those changes occur to the Police Service Act, we are restricted in what we can do. But it doesn't mean that we have not wanted to make those changes. The police service wants to make those changes as well, not just us. You know, of the 24,000 calls they saw last year, and already this year we are up, I believe, 7% for number of calls. Those are mandated through the Police Service Act. And, you know, we realize that taking a individual, putting them through the training that is required for a police officer to deal with any situation, including use of force, and then having them do some of the tasks that we then are required, for example, paid duty at a Belleville Senators game, or parked outside of an excavation because we can only have police officers to direct traffic, or to respond to mental health cases, calls that we know are just need to be de-escalated. But we don't have that option, and that becomes the challenge. So, you know, one of the things that I think this process is going to be good for us is that it will allow us to have some dialogue. You know, I said earlier that we get to have our say, but it doesn't mean we get to have our way. And I found with engaging a number of people on this issue, because as they've contacted me, I said, let's talk about it. And as we listen and we have a dialogue and we share information, you know, many people say, well, I didn't realize that. I didn't understand that. That's good to know. It's an education process. But there are still some that don't want to let the facts get in the way of their opinion. They are against the police. They believe that the police are, you know, again, when we talk about 24,000 calls in the city of Belleville last year, the amount of ones where there were issues are minuscule. But for some people, they don't care. They believe the whole police force is a problem. And so, you know, that's the challenge. How do you sort of walk that line? I would, you know, I want to be very honest and candid. I have learned a lot when I got elected in 2014. I came thinking I knew a lot about the city and what the city needed to do. You know, certainly issues of mental health and the vulnerable sector really opened my eyes. I had not experienced that as a resident of Belleville in my lifestyle. Certainly, it became something that I was well aware, and I saw the costs to our community. Big part of my campaign platform in the last election, talking about how we can help the vulnerable sector, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, particularly with the social infrastructure fund that we have with casino funds, that we're able to help people in those non-traditional municipal areas, but to do that. But I think that as we talk about this, we may be talking about mental health and addictions issues for this forum, but they are completely related to issues of food insecurity, housing insecurity, addiction, and mental health. And the fact of the matter is the system that we have now is not working. It's not working. The answer isn't for municipalities to pay more of their municipal property tax money into it. The issue isn't for the province to do the very least that they have to. I think Councillor Carr talked about a holistic approach to it. That is the only way it's going to work, but that's going to take some work. And it's going to take some flexibility and some willingness to try to be experimental. But, you know, it's an issue. If you don't see that we have people in our community that are vulnerable and that need help, then you don't have a brain. And if you don't want to help those people, then you don't have a heart. And I think all of us, regardless of our perspectives and regardless of where we come from, we all see the pain that mental health, addictions, insecurity from poverty and lack of opportunity. We all see the problems that's causing, and we're all committed to doing something about it. So let's vote on this motion after Councillor Millette wraps up, and we'll go to take the steps to pull together some type of forum that will be inclusive of all different points of view, so we can have a dialogue and we can listen and learn and share information and try to figure out how we can deal with something that everybody is struggling with. Councillor Millette.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief in summing up. I've heard some encouraging words from people that I hadn't been expecting to hear from on this, because there was that tone when we were first. But I'll tell you what, I don't mind a demanding tone. I don't mind people shouting. I don't, what they're shouting we might not like. But people deserve the right to shout if that's what they feel and that's the way they feel they can get their message across. You know, we representative, or today the Americans, our American friends, laid Representative John Lewis, the civil rights leader, in the rotunda. And one quote from John Lewis is actually on face masks that people are wearing in the rotunda today. And it was so inspiring before I came, I had to look it up. He said, I want to see young people in America feel the spirit of the 1960s and find a way to get in the, get in the way, to find a way to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. Now, I think I saw some of the demanding tones that came in the emails. We want this, we demand that. We want this, we demand that. A group of people back in the 1960s walked across a bridge in Selma, Alabama, and got beat for their trouble, but they were demanding in their tone. To dismiss it because their tone is demanding isn't enough. If we have this forum and people get to the microphone and they're shouting at us, we damn well have to listen. That's why we're here. Okay? All these people want to do is to be heard, and they don't want to be dismissed. I carried on the conversation with the one gentleman that you were referring to, Councillor Culhane from Montreal. Well, he grew up in Belleville. He's a very erudite young man. And after speaking with him, I saw that he had a Montreal area code, but I let him have his piece. Turned out in the end, he went to school with my daughters. He saved that for the end. But, and I checked with my daughters, and they said, he's an amazing young man. He's a successful man. But he spoke eloquently, he spoke passionately about his hometown. And that's all this motion is for us to listen. And we'll work out the logistics. We'll hear some loud words, but we're going to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millette. The motion's on the floor, so that is the amended motion. Do you want to just read it one more time, Councillor Millette, and then I'll call the vote?
That council establish a community forum to directly hear from the people who have reached out to us seeking a dialogue about policing, ways in which the police are funded, and how they are called upon to deal with matters related to mental health and addictions issues, as well as including in the discussion members of council, police, various community agencies whose specialties include mental health and addictions, and finally, as well as representatives or elected members of senior levels of government.
All right. Motion's on the floor. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Notice the motion. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm giving notice today, July 27th, 2020, that the August 10th, 2020 council meeting, I will be bringing the following motion forward for council's consideration. That Mr. Tony Fleming, the city's integrity commissioner, be invited to attend the regular council meeting on September 14th, 2020, or a date convenient to Mr. Fleming to address council and the council members who have an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have for Mr. Fleming. And that's the motion.
Okay, and it's in writing, so if we can just get that to Mr. McDonald. Thank you. Anyone else for notices of motion? Seeing none, announcements. Anyone have announcements they'd like to make today? Councillor Thompson.
Just quickly. I know you'll speak about it. It certainly was a pleasure to be at the sod turning, or the dirt turning on Avondale Road, and it was a pleasure to be there, and I thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Yes, a member of the public canceled very last minute for the Avondale groundbreaking, and I was able to contact Councillor Thompson. It was good to be there. I think that for 14 years that you have been on council previously, every single one of those years, Avondale was one of them. And I was there on Sunday, and they made nice progress for their first few days as that goes along. Anyone else for announcements? All right. I just have a couple. I am proud of the progress that we as a city have been making as we move into phase 3 of the COVID-19 provincial reopening relaxations. It's safe to say that all the residents of Belleville have been taking very nicely to the additional protocols that we have put in place. I want to thank all residents for wearing face coverings when necessary and for helping our community as a whole to keep the COVID-19 numbers down. I am so proud to report that there have been no new cases of COVID-19 in our entire health board region since May the 18th. So far, the reopening has not affected those numbers. This is something that we should all be very proud of, but at the same time, we must remain vigilant and careful as we move forward. We are very pleased to have 4 new playgrounds now open in the city, 4 playgrounds, I should say, now open in the city of Belleville. And it's great to see families abiding by the social distancing protocols at these parks. More of our playgrounds are opening every day as staff are able to inspect and prepare them for opening. And I want to thank our fantastic staff members for their work on that. The Belleville Public Library will be opening up as of August the 10th under specific COVID-19 regulations. The new hours will be Monday to Thursday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Friday and Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. I hope to have more announcements for the members of the public and council soon as we move forward into the reopening of additional city facilities. Exciting news from Loyalist College was announced last Thursday. Current and former youth who were in the extended care of the Children's Aid Society are eligible to apply for a financial assistance waiver which covers the cost of their entire tuition. So let me repeat this. These are people, these are men and women who were in the care of the Children's Aid Society and who have grown up to be now college-going age. And Loyalist College is doing a full financial waiver of their tuition. The college's $80,000 investment will support up to 16 individuals, and what a testament to people's undying or unending ability to aspire to better things. We're very, very proud of Loyalist College, and we're very proud of those young men and women who are going to school and making a better life for themselves. I'm also happy to announce that our very own Paul Buck, Manager of Transit Operations, has been elected as the board member of the Ontario Public Transit Association. It is a great honor to see Belleville represented at the provincial level. Myself and colleagues and members of the Transit Committee are all very proud of Mr. Buck, and we congratulate him on that. Last Thursday, the 23rd, Glenmore National Historic Site received some very positive news. The Glenmore is receiving a $34,000 grant from the Community Museum Operating Grant, which is meant to help community museums contribute to the economic well-being as employers and tourist attractions, and strengthens their role as custodians and interpreters of the province's irreplaceable heritage collections. Provincial Minister Lisa MacLeod was there along with our MPP Todd Smith, and this is money to help make up for the difficulty that these very, very important organizations in our community are doing. I also believe $27,000 was announced for the Empire Rockfest festival to help them with the interruption of the COVID-19 situation, and then there were a number of other announcements in MPP Todd Smith's region. The pop-ups in the Bay continue to be a popular summertime destination for residents of Belleville and from beyond. If you haven't had a chance to visit them yet, I encourage you to head down to West Zwick's. I want to say a couple of words about downtown Alfresco and the Prismatica display. We are hugely impressed by the BDIA and the downtown restaurants and retailers and how well the Alfresco on front has taken off. Congratulations to all, and thank you for your hard work. The installation of the Prismatica has been a crowd pleasure. As with the pop-ups, if you haven't already been downtown, I highly recommend you make a point to visit. The number of people that are down now on Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays during the evening to take advantage of what we've done there is being incredible. And I think that we all hope that the province will make the necessary changes to allow us to continue to do these types of things in the future. But certainly we're grateful for the opportunity during this year to have these COVID-safe, family-friendly activities in our downtown core. Lastly, I'd like to remind residents that we have been running a cooling center at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center at the Senior Center. I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Patry if he can just come forward to the microphone to give us a quick update on the cooling center. It's been open now for a few weeks. If you want to just push the button, Deputy Chief, and then give us an idea of how it's been going.
Yes, very briefly to you, Your Worship, and to Council. The activation of the cooling center has been received well. It is serving a need, although there's room for more. Again, getting the word out there for people to find a place to actually, in these times, rest and get into an environment that's cooler. Again, the numbers are a little modest, but again, there's plans. If those numbers grow, we'll just relocate it into another space within the sports and rec facilities there. Currently, and maybe adding to some of the shortcomings of people in that environment, masks are mandatory. Again, though, it's a great place to cool down. They've got water, they've got free Wi-Fi. Again, it really is just an environment to get out of the environment, or sorry, to get out of the weather a little bit and enjoy. And at that point, I would say, you know, the comments have been positive. It just hasn't been taken that opportunity with a lot of people. And maybe some of that is now that the mall's open too. You know, maybe we're competing again with mall space. But it remains there. It remains a viable option to many of the community members, and it'll continue.
Right. Thank you very much, Deputy Chief.
Welcome.
Yeah, and so, you know, again, I know there are people who don't have air conditioning where they live, and it has been brutally hot the last little while. The cooling center is there to help people. It's open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Transit is available to get you to that location. We are working on some additional entertainment for inside there in terms of some board games, but we have masks on site. And we encourage people, if they are struggling to keep cool during these very hot days, please remember to stop by the cooling center and stay tuned to the city website for when it is operating. And the last thing, just a last-minute announcement or a new event. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., our provincial MPP, Todd Smith, will be here to make an announcement regarding downtown Wi-Fi and funding. Council, this hasn't gone out to you. You're welcome to attend tomorrow morning. And we'll be doing that here in Council Chambers at 9 a.m. With that, I will ask for a confirmatory bylaw, that bylaw number 2020-146, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council at its meeting held on July 27, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 27th day of July, 2020. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Culhane. All in favor? It's carried. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.